Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by 𝐻𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗘 on Wattpad. Now let's start. You did amazing, Izuku. Keep up the good work. Ida said with a smile that said I am not proud, but concerned. Izuku just got done with a low-class villain that only took 10 minutes to capture. He didn't enjoy many things anymore, everything felt numb for him. Izuku nodded and Ida sighed. Ever since 𝗂𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 left you, you have been so upset. Izuku looked at him with a smile. I'm fine. He wished that Ida would just drop it. 𝗂𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 did what she thought was needed and he couldn't change it. He just needs to move on without the constant reminder of her. Ida stopped and said, Please stop lying. I saw a woman come out of your house, then never saw her again. You were doing a one-night stand. Normally no one would have known, but Ida has been running by Izuku's house every morning to see if he has eaten breakfast yet. Izuku looked down in shame and said, I know. I'm sorry. Izuku knew that one-night stands don't help in the long run, but he couldn't stand being alone in his house. Even if he had to use his status to get company, he got what he wanted in the end. Ida sighed and said, It's fine, I just see you're not happy with your life right now. Izuku looked away and lied. I am very happy with my life, Ida. Don't you have to go home now? Ida sighed and nodded. He knew there was no getting through to him if he didn't want to listen. I should. May gets very antsy when I come home late. Just think about what I said, Izuku. Izuku nodded and walked off, leaving Ida alone in his worries. Izuku glared at the ground and looked ahead. His head was filled with bitter, selfish thoughts. Why should he say that, he questioned, even though he knew the answer. Ida just cared more about him than he did about himself. He then thought bitterly, his love is still with him. His isn't, she left willingly because he wasn't good enough. Izuku shook his head, trying to silence his thoughts, and entered his house. He wanted it to be filled with joy, smiles like it used to. When he was loved, when he had someone to come home to, when he was happy, however, now it was just pure silence, cold and sad. He sighed and shook his head. I'm happy. He kept telling himself that ever since 𝗂𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 left him, who knows, maybe he could brainwash himself eventually. He made a beeline to the kitchen, where he made some katsudon and sat down on the couch. He flipped the channels and saw the news headline. Number 1 hero, Deku saved the day once again. He protected Japan and saved 50 lives today. He truly is the new symbol of peace. Izuku flipped the channel to a comedy and creaked a smile. As it played through the movie, he thought about the day's interactions. I shouldn't get mad at Ida, he was just trying to help. He sighed as he realized he should apologize to his caring friend. As he ate his food, suddenly the noise of a knock echoed through the house. He thought it was the mailman, so he continued to eat. No point to get up if it was just going to be left anyway. The knocking persisted, causing Izuku to get up. He pondered about who it could be, especially at this late hour. He opened the door just to get hit in the knee by the person who didn't realize that the door opened. He groaned in pain and rubbed his knee, looking around to see who did that. I'm sorry. Izuku looked down to see a little girl with big green eyes and freckles looking at him. How curious, he thought as he examined the girl. She had the most matted hair he had ever seen, with a bow tangled in the middle as if the hairstyle was done weeks ago. The little girl who spoke her words wasn't spoken well, kind of like a mumble, and she struggled with the R sound. Hi, is this the Midoryia house? Izuku's eyes widened as he nodded. Why on earth was she here, he questioned himself, since his neighborhood there weren't many children in it. He forced a smile on his face as he answered, Why yes, what do you need? The little girl seemed to be struggling with some inner turmoil and fiddled with her skirt. She then muttered as if she rehearsed it a million times, I'm your daughter. Izuku was taken back, since never in a million years did he ever think a little girl would come up to his door claiming to be his descendant. Without realizing, he began to mumble his thoughts. I couldn't have a daughter. Could I? The possibilities are slim, only around 15%. She does kind of look like me, however, nothing like a 𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. Meaning she can't be a 𝗂𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘, so that must mean she is lying or it was a one-night stand. I use protection though, so the last one is very, very slim. Of course, condoms are only 93% effective. Then the question is, how did she find my house? How old is she? 𝐻𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗘 and I broke up 6 years ago, so she could be 5 or 4. That would be around the correct time frame, with my indulges turning extreme around that time. Her clothes are dirty and there is a hole in the tights she is wearing. How long has she been out? What happened to her mother? Did she get a quirk? Would she be able to get my quirk if what she says is true? That could help my problem. Even though she could be quirkless like I was. Should I ask 𝐻𝐻𝐿 for help? No, he would get annoyed or go in shock. I could do a DNA test, but should I tell 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 about this? No, he has to deal with the twins. How about 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫? No, he has 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 to deal with. It was quite puzzling. A small voice brought him back to reality. Daddy, you're mumbling. Izuku's eyes widened and shook his head. He could not claim responsibility, not in this state. He sputtered out, I'm not your daddy. Where do you live? The little girl sighed and shook her head. Sure you are, and I live here. She walked in between Izuku's legs into the house. He quickly turned, panicking. No way, what the girl was saying was true. 𝐻𝐻𝐿, I need to get you back to your parents. She turned to him with a smile. The little girl was just wondering, when will her daddy accept that she's his new problem? She proudly exclaimed, I am with my parent, you. She walked around looking at the living room. It was trashed, food on the table that was there for a while, trash overflowing, dust on the shelves, and a dirty floor. What a slob her new daddy was. Izuku sighed in defeat and asked, Where's your mom? He looked around outside just in case she was sitting in a car. Maybe he'll get some answers then. The little girl thought for a moment, since it has been a while since she spoke to her mother, and said, She said that it wasn't her circus, and I'm not her monkey. She left me a note. It wasn't the nicest, but definitely not the meanest she has said. She handed Izuku a note, and he read it. As he read, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was unreal. He read it again and again, trying to see if it could change magically into a caring, helpful note. Instead, it just continued to read, Dear Mistake, this is not my circus, and you're not my monkey. At least not anymore. I do not need extra stuff to drag around. Go find your papa. His name is Izuku Midoryia. This was his last address. It's a start to find him at least. Have fun, you're not my problem anymore. 𝐻𝐿, how ruthless. Izuku's eyes filled with anger. How could someone do this to their own child? Even if she isn't, he has the duty to get her out of that terrible situation. Even if it's putting her into the system, if what she says is false. Izuku looked at the girl and asked, What's your name, sweetheart? The girl had a big smile and said, 𝐻𝐿/N Midoryia. 𝐻/N Midoryia, that's my name. Izuku smiled, a last name and a first name that was exactly what he needed to try to track down her mother. He cleared his throat after thinking and grabbed her hand. He had to get her out of those rags and into something that would keep her warm. I don't have any clothes for you, but you can wear my old 𝐻𝐻𝐿 onesie. He kept it because it has sentimental value for him, so he kept it in his 𝐻𝐻𝐿 room. Some habits never die. 𝐻/N's eyes sparkled and nodded. She was eager to get out of her clothes and into something clean. Izuku chuckled with an underlying tone of pity and led her to the bathroom. Do you want to take a bath or a shower? He questioned as he approached the tub. 𝐻/N eyes widen in fear. Water. She took a step back, her breathing quickened and her eyes filled with tears. She looked like she was struggling to breathe, and Izuku's eyes widened. Why was 𝐻/N so scared of water? He cleared his throat, trying to figure out the proper way to handle the situation. Yes, sweetheart. 𝐻/N shook her head with tears filling up her eyes, threatening to spill over. I don't want water. Izuku didn't know what to do. He couldn't just let her stay with dirt and grim all over her. He took a deep breath, thinking about his options, but he sighed. You need to bathe. How about I watch you? Or we can bathe with a little water at a time and a washcloth. 𝐻/N looked at Izuku with big eyes. She should trust her new daddy. He is a hero and heroes are good. You promise the water won't hurt me? Izuku's eyes softened and nodded. Okay, can I take the last option? Izuku smiled. It wasn't ideal, but if it can get the dirt off of her, he'll do it, and nodded. He ran the bath for a tiny amount of water as if he was bathing a small animal and put in some bubble bath in it. I'm going to go get the onesie, can you do me a big favor? 𝐻/𝑛 nodded and Izuku smiled. I need you to watch the tub so it won't overflow. You can do that, right? 𝐻/𝑛 was hesitant but nodded. Why? I can, after all, heroes have to do what scares them all the time. Like fighting villains or going to save people in fires. They risk a lot to do that. How do they do that? Is that how people are always safe? How do they always save the day? Most of the time anyway. Izuku's eyes widen as he hears her mumble. The sweetheart. 𝐻/𝑛 snapped out of it and looked at Izuku with wide eyes. I'm going now. 𝐻/𝑛 nodded and looked at the bath. She started to glare at it and then pouted. I hate the bath, she thought as she noticed the faucet was running, but just barely. How strange. Izuku walked to his closet and thought. Where did I put it? Here it is, I hope it can fit her. He walked back to see 𝐻/𝑛 glaring daggers at the tub. Izuku turned off the water, startling the pale/dark/caramel girl. Izuku really didn't want to, but he offered, do you need help bathing? 𝐻/𝑛 shook her head but looked at Izuku. You don't need to stay here. Just promise to come to save me if it harms me. Izuku's eyes softened and nodded, then smiled. Of course. 𝐻/𝑛 got in the bath and Izuku started to cook her food. I need to call 𝐀𝐮𝐱 to get a BLD test ready. I wonder if we can find her mother. After a few minutes, he went to check on 𝐻/𝑛 to see she was trying to reach the towel. Izuku chuckled and wrapped the towel around her. Izuku helped her inside of the onesie and led her to the dining table. She was shorter than Izuku would have thought. Then again, he was also short, so it was to be expected that she would be short if she is telling the truth, that is. He helped her onto the chair and she smiled. Thank you. Izuku smiled and placed some katsudon in front of her. Izuku reheated his own and they ate. 𝐻/𝑛's eyes sparkled, and after they finished, Izuku got up. He washed the dishes to see 𝐻/𝑛 was about to fall asleep at the table. He chuckled and picked her up. Maybe having a child of his own wouldn't be so bad. He might keep her even if she isn't biologically his. Izuku paced back and forth as he waited for the results. He wasn't sure what he would do if they were positive or even negative in that manner. He saw how traumatized the child was, so he wouldn't feel right leaving her to the system to decide where to go. However, he wasn't ready for a child. 𝐻/𝑛 swung her legs back and forth, humming. She had no doubts that he was her daddy. After all, why would her mother lie about that? If it were false, then she would be stuck with her, and her mother doesn't want that to happen. Izuku, calm down. There are only two options, so it's a 50-50 chance that she's your love child, just like it's a 25% chance that All Might is your father. Izuku looked at 𝐀𝐮𝐻 with a deadpan face. He thought that 𝐀𝐮 was over that whole love child business inside. I know. I'm not his child though. A laugh was heard. It was 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, as Izuku calls him, and his voice boomed throughout the room. You have a crybaby brat, Deku. Have fun with that food dash. A hand slammed over his mouth, and Izuku glared slightly. He despised having him touch him. Please do not cuss in front of 𝐻/𝑛, Katsuki glared. He hated being told what to do, and he bit Izuku's hand. I can do whatever I want you, Demon Deku. Izuku looked over to check on 𝐻/𝑛. However, he was only met with the sight of 𝐀𝐮𝐻 covering 𝐻/𝑛's ears. That is good, he doesn't want her to hear 𝐾𝐮's tone. Fearing it may set something off, Izuku glared. No, I don't want you to cuss in front of my D-dash. Izuku was about to blurt out that she was his daughter, however, that just caused Bakugo to smirk and say, You're what, Deku? Fing snot-nosed crybaby but brat. Izuku glared and sighed. He couldn't argue with him. It was like talking to a brick wall. Izuku turned to see 𝐻/𝑛 playing with 𝐀𝐮𝐻's hair. 𝐀𝐮 had an emotionless expression, but held on tightly to her knees since she was on top of his shoulders. Even 𝐀𝐮 wasn't sure how she managed to be up there, however, he didn't mind. Izuku muttered a simple, Thank you. 𝐀𝐮 shrugged and let the 5-year-old comb her tiny fingers through his hair. Ida walked out with a piece of paper. He looked pleasantly happy about the results, as if he believed it was the best thing in the universe. His voice was smooth when he spoke. Izuku, This contains the results for the BLD test. Izuku thanked Ida and looked at the paper. He was a bit hesitant to do so since it would change the course of his life. It would open many different doors, but also many challenges. His eyes widened and he mumbled. It was official, it's positive. He kept mumbling that simple phrase to himself over and over again while Bakugo laughed at him and Shoto clapped. Shoto then said in a monotone, "Congratulations. You're a dad now." Those simple words brought satisfaction to 𝐻/N, and she smiled and said, "I told you so, Daddy." Shoto raised an eyebrow. What a peculiar child. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. Meanwhile, Izuku sighed. What do I do now? Shoto looked at Bakugo, who nodded and said, "How about buying clothes and enrolling her in a school?" Izuku didn't realize how many things truly needed to get done. He then thought about legal custody, bedding, dishes, shampoos, hygiene products, and everything else a child would need. Izuku looked at his agenda on his phone and mumbled. I have a meeting at 3 and a news interview at 5. I have to do a book signing at 12, but I can cancel the haircut at 10. It's only 9, so I could. An angry voice stopped his mumbling. Shut the hell up, Deku. How about some else thing take the diamond brat if your schedule is so full? Deku nodded. It was a good idea. But who would dash? But then Ida's voice stopped his voice. How about I take her today? I am the only one without kids. Well, one that is not born yet. Izuku's eyes widen. How considerate of him to do this for him. However, before he could answer, a crash was heard. Oh no. Owie. She grabbed her head as it ached so badly. They looked over to see 𝐻/N upside down on a wall with green lighting surrounding her. Shoto was shocked, and Katsuki laughed at her, like daughter like dad, it seems. Izuku rushed over and set her upright. All he could think of was that he had her for 5 minutes, and he broke her already. Oh my all might. Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere? Let me check your arms and legs. Shoto shook his head. It was obvious that she was okay, maybe a bit shaken up. However, she was physically okay. Katsuki teased at the excessive coddling. I'm fine, Daddy. My quirk just acted up again. Izuku's eyes widened. Was it even possible for her to have his quirk? Why isn't her body broken if that is the case? He took a breath and asked, What's your quirk? 𝐻/N thought about it for a moment, then said, I don't know the name, but green lighting surrounds me and I get super strong and fast. Izuku's eyes widened. Did she inherit one for all? Is that even possible? 𝐻/N looked at Ida. He had strange legs, but he seemed nice. Izuku sighed, knowing he was running out of time. Ida, if it's not too much trouble, can you take her? She looked at him with sad eyes. She didn't want to go with the man, but she wanted to stay with her daddy. She finally found him, only for him to leave. That doesn't seem right. Ida nodded and scooped her up in his arms, much to her dismay. Of course, I will make sure nothing bad happens to her. You have my word. Izuku smiled slightly, then knocks were heard. Katsuki smirked. What was about to happen was his doing. He walked over to the door and swung it open. A combination of voices was heard yelling, Is it true? They turned to see Mina and a sweat-dropping Kirishima. They looked like they ran all the way there. Mina looked around and then spotted 𝐻/N. 𝐻/N wasn't amused by the high energy that was brought with the new people. Mina then squealed and grabbed 𝐻/N out of Ida's arms before he could even blink. OMG! You're so cute. I could just eat you right up. She pushed 𝐻/N into her chest, squeezing her tightly. Izuku's eyes widen, and he snatches you away from Mina, making Mina whine. 𝐻/N was breathing heavily, and Izuku held her close. Whoever that lady is, she is very touchy. You nearly made her pass out. Mina pouted, and Kirishima smiled. Is that your little princess? 𝐻/N glared and used her quirk to shock his arm. Kirishima yelped and looked at her. Please, don't call me princess. Katsuki laughed at Kirishima, and Kirishima nodded. Shoto was smiling slightly and Ida was shocked. Izuku was dead silent. His daughter just hurt someone and was polite in the same minute. Is he supposed to despln her or praise her for having boundaries, or is it supposed to be a combination of both? Suddenly, he dropped. Ida caught 𝐬/N before she hit the ground with the passing out Izuku. Katsuki just laughed louder. This was priceless, and Kirishima mumbled, "Not manly, Baku bro." Katsuki paid no mind to that remark. Ida set 𝐬/N in Shoto's arms and picked up Izuku. Ida slapped Izuku, and Izuku woke up. What happened? Izuku held his head as he looked around. Ida sighed and said, "You passed out after 𝐬/N shocked Kirishima." Izuku nodded and looked at 𝐬/N, who went back to playing with Shoto's hair. Kirishima looked at 𝐬/N and asked Izuku, "So it's true?" Izuku nodded. "It's true." Kirishima smiled, and Ida took 𝐬/N again. He spoke in a sharp tone, "It's 9:30, you have a haircut to get to." Izuku rushed out of the door. He can't believe that he is going to be late, and Ida sighed. It was going to be a while till Izuku could handle parenting by himself. He looked down at 𝐬/N and smiled. "Today you're with me. Is that okay?" 𝐬/N nodded and climbed onto his shoulders. "Might as well make the most of it. I'm a giant now." Ida sighed, and Katsuki laughed again. "You're just short." 𝐬/N sent a shock at him, but he dodged and glared. "You little brat." Ida left with her on his shoulders before Katsuki could do anything. 𝐬/N giggled as she rode with Ida. It was funny how he kept correcting other drivers as if they could hear his suggestions. He was very prominent for the other drivers to use their turning signals properly. Luckily, he had a car seat in the trunk due to overshopping for his soon-to-be child and strapped her in. He put on some 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐵 because they took everything bad out of songs. He didn't want to listen to the regular radio since it was vulgar and not something a young girl should listen to. Ida deemed them kid-approved to listen to. 𝐬/N looked out the window and asked, "Where are we going, Mr. Ida?" Ida nodded and kept his focus on the road. "We are going to a park, then to the ice cream parlor. Is that something that would interest you?" 𝐬/N nodded with a smile, her green eyes shining. "Yes. Thank you." Ida smiled at how respectful she was. She was more excited about the ice cream, however, the park was nice to go to. Even if it was filled with other kids. Not her favorite part of the experience, but she tolerates it. Ida pulled into the park parking lot and got out. It was the most respectable park there is. It has soft ground, so if the kids fell, they wouldn't get seriously hurt. It has a fresh coat of paint and is derusted every 3 years. It has the latest equipment, and it was truly the best. He helped 𝐬/N out of the car and walked into the playground. It was colorful, but no one was there. "This is the Ida Park. My family made this years ago to keep children from getting hurt. It is the most respectable park there is." 𝐬/N's eyes looked around and sparkled. It looked amazing and so clean. It was much better than the park she used to go to. Her hair bounced slightly and she ran to the slide. Ida sighed and followed her. She crawled onto the slide step. She was wearing an F/C shirt and black shorts. It was a good outfit to be practical, at least by Ida's standards, since he bought it for her that morning. Ida looked at her and noticed something. As she was climbing the steps, she was unusually small for someone her age. How malnourished was she? He wondered as he walked over to her. She reached the top and smiled. "I did it." She had a huge smile on her face and Ida clapped. "Great job." 𝐬/N slid down the slide and laughed the whole way down. Her cheerfulness was hard not to smile. Ida watched as she ran to the seesaw. "Mr. Ida, can you play with me?" Ida's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Of course." He was overjoyed that she wanted to play with him. Maybe she is starting to accept him. What a joy that would be. 𝐬/N climbed on the seesaw, and Ida carefully got on. He did feel a little silly being on a seesaw with a 5-year-old, but ignored it. He would have to get over that feeling if he was going to be a good parent to his child. He must try his best now. He bounced up and down, making 𝐬/N giggle. "It's like flying." Ida nodded. It was pretty high and said, "Yes, but do not let go of the handle." 𝐬/N nodded, and they continued to play on the seesaw. 𝐬/N waited for Ida to get off, and he helped her off. She thanked him and smiled. She looked at the swings and her eyes sparkled. Can you push me on the swings? 𝐻𝐮𝐬 nodded and followed her to the swings. 𝐻/𝐿 was picked up and put in the baby swing. She pouted and looked at 𝐻𝐻𝐻. I'm a big girl. I can go on the big girl swings. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 sighed. Those were far more dangerous and got her out of the baby swing. 𝐻/𝐿 got on top of the big girl swings by herself. She nearly flipped over 3 times, but 𝐻𝐻𝐻 saved her before she fell. She cheered when she got on and grabbed the chains. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 shook his head with a smile. You're ready to be pushed. 𝐻/𝐿 nodded with a big smile. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 began to push her gently, and she began to swing her legs. Back and forth she went, higher and higher each time. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 stepped back, and she was swinging all by herself. It caused him a bit of anxiety, but he figured he could catch her with his speed if she fell. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 brought out his phone and took a picture. I will have to send this to Izuku later. He watched 𝐻/𝐿 like a hawk and noticed that it was almost, 𝐻/𝐿, are you hungry? 𝐻/𝐿 looked down at him and shook her head. No. She couldn't identify when she felt hungry, and it was more fun to stay than to eat anyway. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 sighed, but his eyes grew wide as she fell back off the ground. He used his quirk to catch her. She was giggling, but tears streamed down her face. Can we not do that again? It's scary. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded and wiped her tears. Let's eat lunch and then get some ice cream. 𝐻/𝐿 nodded, and 𝐻𝐻𝐻 carried her back to the car. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 drove to the 𝐹/R and got out. He once again helped her out and walked in. Hello, welcome to 𝐹/R. Do you have a reservation already? 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded. Yes, ma'am, it's under 𝐻𝐻𝐻. Her eyes widened and she smiled. Right this way, sir. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 grabbed 𝐻/𝐿's hand and followed the waitress to the table. They sat down and the waitress smiled. Press the button when you're ready for your drinks and food. With that, she walked away, leaving the two alone. She suddenly stops and turns to where only 𝐻𝐻𝐻 could see her lips. Do you need a high chair? 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded and the waitress walked away. 𝐻/𝐿 looked over the menu, but she was standing on the chair. A few seconds later, she came back with a booster seat. 𝐻/𝐿 sat down and smiled. Thank you. The waitress smiled and left. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 looked at the drink menu and looked at 𝐻/𝐿. What do you want to drink? 𝐻/𝐿 bounced up and down and said, F/D please. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded and asked, Do you know what you want to eat? 𝐻/𝐿 nodded and her eyes sparkled. F/F. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 smiled and pressed the button. The waitress came back with a notepad. What do you want to drink? 𝐻𝐻𝐻 looked at the menu. The F/D and sparkling mineral water. The waitress nodded and asked, Do you know what you two are going to eat? 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded. Yes, ma'am. I would like the steak and she will have the 𝐻/𝐿 cut him off and said, F/F. Please. The waitress giggled and smiled. That's coming right up. With that she left. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 looked at 𝐻/𝐿 and asked, How did you find your dad's house if you mind me asking? 𝐻/𝐿 smiled. Not at all. Ms. M/N left his address in the goodbye note. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 was confused about who was Ms. M/N. Was it her mom? Before he could wonder about it anymore, their food came. 𝐻/𝐿's eyes sparkled, and 𝐻𝐻𝐻 watched as she ate the first bite. He ate his food, and after waiting a little bit, she finished hers. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 paid the check with a 25% tip. He helped her inside the car and drove. Do you still want to go get ice cream? 𝐻/𝐿 nodded, and 𝐻𝐻𝐻 smiled. He was so going to spoil her after all. She is going to be his goddaughter. Either Izuku allows it, or he allows it. This is the one thing 𝐻𝐻𝐻 won't take no for an answer. They went inside the ice cream parlor, and 𝐻/𝐿 had never seen so many ice flavors in her whole life. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 chuckled at her reaction and said, You promise that you will brush your teeth when you get home. 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and said, I promise. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 nodded, and they walked up to the ice cream stand. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 saw the one he wanted, and 𝐻/𝐿's eyes sparkled when she saw F/FL. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 looked down, and 𝐻/𝐿 pointed to the F/FL ice cream. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 went to the cashier. Can we have one F/FL and one vanilla with strawberries in it? The cashier nodded and said, That would be $8.90. 𝐻𝐻𝐻 paid and they got their ice creams. Ida sat down at a booth, and 𝐬/N sat down next to him. She laid a napkin on her lap, and Ida nodded in approval. Ida did the same, and 𝐬/N giggled as she ate the ice cream. Ida ate his ice cream and thought, why not sugar her up before giving her back to Izuku? 𝐬/N was already bouncing from the sugar, then she finished the ice cream. Ida got out, and 𝐬/N followed him back to the car. Ida drove back to the hangout and got out. He helped her out, and 𝐬/N ran inside. Ida easily followed her, but then she started to use her quirk. She was bouncing off the walls and ran inside where Bakugo, Shoto, and Izuku were waiting. Watch out! Ida yelled as 𝐬/N ran inside the room, nearly hitting Bakugo's head. She was running around, and Izuku caught her. What's happening? Ida sighed. She has a sugar rush. Bakugo glared, and Shoto sighed. Izuku looked down and smiled. Did you have fun with Ida? 𝐬/N nodded with a huge smile. Mr. Ida is awesome. He took me to a park and then to eat an ice cream. Izuku chuckled and thanked Ida. With that, the day with Ida was over. 𝐬/N pouted as Izuku dressed her. She was a big girl, she can get dressed alone. 𝐬/N didn't like the outfit Izuku picked out but didn't tell him. It was better than what she wore prior. She can tolerate it. Izuku smiled and made her breakfast. He felt like he was getting the hang of being a dad. I already packed your lunch, and I'm going to walk you to school. 𝐬/N smiled and nodded. She ate her breakfast, it was delicious and she was grateful for him. They started to walk hand in hand. She never actually went to a school before but she wasn't going to tell him that. She can handle it by herself. 𝐬/N had an All Might and Deku themed backpack. It was called the Symbols of Peace. They arrived at the gate to see Katsuki with a kid, Shoto with 2 kids, and a blonde guy with 2 kids. 𝐬/N started to hide behind Izuku. There were so many people there. She didn't appreciate it at all. She looked around realizing someone was missing. Where's Mr. Ida? Izuku smiled, happy that she remembered her self-proclaimed godfather, and said, he's not here. As if on cue, 𝐬/N was snatched out of his grasp and there was Ida. I am here, Izuku. She was overjoyed to see him, he made everything better. She hugged his neck smiling. 𝐬/N giggled as they approached the group. Oi, Deku, it looks like she likes 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 over your butt. Izuku sulked, it does seem to be that way. He grabbed 𝐬/N off of Ida's shoulders with the intention to put her to the ground. However, Izuku looked at Bakugo's kid and stopped putting you down. Izuku put her down. Shoto said after he realized the hesitation the new father had. Izuku looked at Shoto and said, what if he bullies her? Shoto gave Izuku a look that said your childhood isn't hers and Izuku sighed. Fine. He wasn't happy about the decision. He would rather homeschool her and keep her safe. He set 𝐬/N down and Izuku introduced the man with a black lightning bolt. This is Mr. Denki. Denki, this is 𝐬/N. 𝐬/N smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Denki. Denki blinked. He never met a child with such manners before and laughed. No wonder Ida likes her so much. It's nice to meet you too, doll. 𝐬/N titled her head. How strange, she wasn't a doll. She was a girl. She then heard a groan. 𝐬/N turned her head to see a girl with dark purple hair and bright yellow eyes with a lightning bolt in her hair. Her voice rang out with a bit of a dull tone. Don't mind, Papa. He's stupid, at least that's what Mama says. 𝐬/N giggled and Denki gasped. Why do you say that about Papa? Another voice interrupted and it was a boy with golden hair with a purple lightning strike. His voice was more like his father's. Because it's true. Denki muttered. Just wait until you're older, you will be just like me. The boy rolled his eyes, not believing his father, and said, I'm Rai Kaminari and this is my little sister Akari Kaminari. Please call us by our first names. 𝐬/N smiled and shook his head. I'm 𝐬/N Midoryia, nice to meet you both. 𝐬/N let his hand go and saw a girl with white and red hair. It's like Mr. Shoto's. She wondered if it was as soft as his too. 𝐬/N walked up to her with a smile. Hi, I'm 𝐬/N Midoryia. Nice to meet you. The girl smiled and said, I'm 𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻 Todoroki, nice to meet you too. 𝐻/N. 𝐻/N smiled and 𝐻𝐻 pointed to her brother. That's Hisoki, my older brother. He doesn't talk much but he's nice when you get to know him. He was cute. 𝐻/N smile and stomps came behind her. Quickly her smile fell. Who are you, Pinky? 𝐻/N could feel her go pale when a mini version of Bakugo got in her face. Answer me. Another voice spoke up and pushed the Bakugo back. Sorry about Katsuo. I'm Akio Kirishima but you can call me Akio. He showed his pointy teeth and he had pink hair with darker pink streaks. His right eye was yellow and his left was red. It's okay. I'm 𝐻/N Midoryia, nice to meet you, Akio. A girl with pink hair and red eyes popped behind Akio. I'm Akane. She grabbed 𝐻/N's hand and said, You're my new best friend. 𝐻/N didn't know many people but that doesn't seem like it should work like that. Maybe it was a hero thing. 𝐻/N turned to her dad to see he was waving while being held back by Ida and Shoto. How odd her daddy was. Why was he being held back while waving? 𝐻𝐻 smiled and grabbed her other hand. Akane ran with them, leaving the boys alone. Come on. The boys chased after the girls and Katsuo just walked behind them. The dads watched until they were inside the school. How long do you think until they get in a fight? They turned to Denki and Katsuki smirked. My boy will destroy your kids. Especially yours, Deku. Deku glared at Katsuki. No way, Kaken. She's stronger than that. Ida nodded and Shoto sighed. I just hope the twins don't get in trouble. Deku nodded and with that, the dads went their own ways. One of them being grabbed by his arm being dragged away when he tried to turn back. The girls dragged 𝐻/N to a table by the window and smiled. The teacher walked in and the boys sat down at the table beside the girls. The teacher smiled and began to talk. Rewriting. The bell went off and everyone rushed out. Katsuo was the first one out. Girls, come on. The girls nodded and followed the boys to the lunchroom. Katsuo smirked, having a table all to himself. Everyone sat down with him. Akio sat down beside Katsuo and Rai sat down beside Akio. Hisoki sat down beside 𝐻𝐻, who sat down beside 𝐻/N. Akane sat down on the other side of 𝐻/N. Akari sat down beside Akane. 𝐻/N opened her lunchbox to see Izuku did an art project. 𝐻𝐻's eyes widened and 𝐻/N didn't want to eat it if it was in an animal shape. That's so cute. 𝐻/N nodded and Akane smirked. Don't you want to eat it? 𝐻/N looked at the bears and penguins. I would feel bad. Katsuo had an evil smirk. He grabbed a bear and took a bite out of it. 𝐻/N was shocked, eyes wide, and she blinked. He just stole her food. He murdered a bear. Akane snorted and 𝐻𝐻 was shocked also. They watched as he ate the bear. How could you? The bear was so cute and you ate him. Katsuo smirked and went to grab a penguin. 𝐻/N glared and put the lids on the bentos. No one else was going to die on her watch. What an evil little boy. Katsuo's smirk went away. Akio sighed. He did not approve of his friend's actions and said, That wasn't manly, Katsubut. Katsuo glared and 𝐻𝐻 was still in shock. 𝐻/N put her hand on 𝐻𝐻's shoulder. It's okay. 𝐻𝐻 nodded and sighed. You are going to eat right. 𝐻/N smile. Of course, just not the bear or penguins. She would have to ask her daddy not to make them so cute next time. Once lunch was over, it was time for recess. Akane grabbed 𝐻/N's hand and dragged her to the playground. It looked very different than the park Mr. Ida took me to. It had rusted metal, chipping paint, and outdated equipment. Akane met up with the group and Katsuo smirked. Let's play hide and go seek. Who's it? 𝐻/N looked around and smiled. Am I allowed to use my quirk? Katsuo turned to her and smirked. Sure. 𝐻/N smiled. I'll be the seeker then. Everyone went and hid. After 𝐻/N count to 30 and began to have green lighting around her. She used her quirk and speed around. The inside of the slide was Rai. 𝐻/N smirked and tagged him. You're out. Rai's eyes widened and he watched as 𝐻/N tagged Akane, who was on top of the monkey bars. 𝐻/N looked in a tree to see Katsuo's back. She tagged his back and he turned to see her touching the ground again. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 looked around and used her quirk again. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 tagged Akari, who was hiding in the slide entrance. The only ones left were the twins. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 knew she was reaching her limit with her quirk. She saw 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 hiding behind 𝗧𝗟𝗘 in the treehouse. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 tagged 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and 𝗧𝗟𝗘 jumped down. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 ran after him and he ran too. He used his creation quirk for a skateboard. How cool! 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 tagged him but 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 tripped her. She fell on top of 𝗧𝗟𝗘 and groaned. "Why did you trip me?" 𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed and sat up. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 fell onto his lap and she moved. Everything was spinning and hurts. She didn't move off of his lap though. She winced in pain. She knew she overused her quirk. "Daddy's going to kill me." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why would Izuku kill you?" It seemed far-fetched for him to kill anyone. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 pointed to her left ankle. "I overused my quirk and my ankle was sorta twisted." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed and asked, "Are you sure it's not because Bakugo tripped you?" 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 nodded. "Yeah, he tripped my right foot." She lied. It was the foot he tripped, but she didn't want anyone in trouble. 𝗧𝗟𝗘 got skeptical about what she said and helped her up. "How long until the effects are over?" 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 looked down. "I will have to go to the nurse." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 nodded and sighed. "How about I just carry you?" 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 shook her leg. "It hurts." "If it's easier." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 picked her up in bridal style and walked past the group. "What happened to 𝐒𝐮𝐴?" 𝗧𝗟𝗘 glared at 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and said, "Well, someone tripped her. She sprained her ankle, plus with the backlash of her quirk she has to go to the nurse." 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 rolled his eyes but noticed the pained expression on 𝐒𝐮𝐴's face. He actually felt bad. Akio shook his head. "You have been so unmanly today." He was very disappointed in his friend. That wasn't what his dad said a man should do. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 watched as the to-do twins walked back inside. "That's not okay. She was winning and you were mad because she got you out." Akane walked away with Akari. Rai sighed and said, "Let's hope she doesn't tell your dad." 𝗀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 rolled his eyes and walked away. 𝗧𝗟𝗘 explained what happened to the nurse and the nurse sighed. "She will be okay in a few days after I use my quirk." The nurse's hands emitted a green hue and wrapped 𝐒𝐮𝐴's ankle. "You can walk on it now, but do not put your body weight on it." 𝐒𝐮𝐴 nodded and 𝗧𝗟𝗘 helped her down from the table. "Oh yeah, your dad is on his way." 𝐒𝐮𝐴's eyes widened and 𝗧𝗟𝗘 snickered. She was going to be put on lockdown. Have fun with that. She frowned at him and sighed. 𝐒𝐮𝐴 was going out the office while 𝗧𝗟𝗘 walked behind her being ready to catch her. He wasn't going to let her out of his sight. 𝗒𝐮 grabbed her backpack and Akane nearly tackled 𝗒𝐮. 𝗧𝗟𝗘 blocked her and 𝗒𝐮 smiled. "I'm fine." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 shook his head. "No. She sprained her ankle and can't fully walk." 𝗒𝐮 giggled nervously and then the most horrific thing was heard through the halls. "My baby. I'm coming." 𝗧𝗟𝗘 smirked and 𝗒𝐮 groaned. The classroom busted open to see a panicked Izuku. He was still inside of his hero costume. He caused quite the commotion with the other kids who looked starstruck. "My baby." 𝗒𝐮 shrunk behind 𝗧𝗟𝗘, who stepped aside. He wasn't going to get in the way. Izuku looked at 𝗒𝐮 and then ran up. He picked her up and looked at her ankle. "Who caused this?" 𝗒𝐮 was about to tell her story when 𝗧𝗟𝗘 said, "Bakugo tripped her while she was using her quirk running." Izuku glared at 𝗀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and said, "I am telling your father about this. I will not let this go." 𝗒𝐮 tugged on his rabbit hoodie. "Can we go now?" Izuku nodded and left the classroom. 𝗒𝐮's ankle healed relatively fast, due to the nurse's quirk, and she was allowed back at the school. She entered the classroom carefully, only to get tackled by Akari and Akane. A scream ripped from her throat as she fell back. Her friends laughed as they stayed on top of her. Then a voice that sounded irritated rang out, "Get off. She just finished healing." They looked down with guilt and apologized, getting up immediately. 𝗒𝐮 looked at 𝗧𝗟𝗘 as he helped her up and smiled. "Thank you." He nodded, not knowing how to respond. He grabbed Emiko's hand, leading her to their table. He looked back slightly with a smile, seeing her go to her seat, which was different from before due to the subject of the day. Hisoki watched her from the corner of his eye. He was strangely fond of the new girl. Katsuo refused to make eye contact and continued looking at his desk. He felt guilty, but he couldn't admit it. After all, his dad rarely ever apologized, and that's only to his mom. His mommy was always right, even if his dad said otherwise. 𝐻/N didn't care. His feelings weren't her problem. The teacher smiled at 𝐻/N and began teaching. The bell rings once again and all the children put their crayons away. Follow the leader. 1, 2, 3, 4, follow me to the door. 5, 6, 7, 8, be quiet to participate. 𝐻/N didn't know what to do but just followed Emiko. It seemed like they followed the chant the teacher was saying. She tried to imitate Emiko, who swung her hair and found it hard to alternate the weight on her legs to achieve a proper swing. Emiko was so pretty. She smiled as she admired how her hair looked. The teacher played the leader and led them to the lunchroom. Once they arrived, the teacher left, but not without telling them to have a good lunch. Katsuo walked to their table to see a group of boys take it. Everyone tended to sit in the same spot, so it was strange for it to change. One thing Katsuo doesn't like is change. 𝐻/N knew this wasn't going to end well, so she hid behind Hisoki. She knew that he was the level-headed one, but she also kept an eye out in case she had to step in. Hisoki didn't mind and stepped closer to her, enjoying being the protector. He also grabbed his sister, making her do the same as their friend. He takes pride in being the one everyone can count on. Move it, extras. The blonde boy with orange eyes smirked. It usually works, especially when his dad says it. So why would it not work now? A blonde kid who sounded like a human accordion spoke. Why should we? We were here first, so run along, hero kids. Katsuo got a dark look and the boy continued. I am Koana Monoma and I know you won't fight because 1A's kids are cowards. Too afraid to get their parents called because they are heroes. Exactly why they are idiots and why 1B was better. 𝐻/N was confused by his words, trying to figure out what he meant. Katsuo had enough and punched Koana. He didn't know what he meant. He knew that he was being disrespectful. He also knew that the only way to fix disrespectful brats was to beat them. It was simply how the world worked. If you were a brat, then you get crushed. He just so happens to be the one to move it along. 𝐻/N tensed when Casto started to explode them. This wasn't going to end well, she thought to herself. A boy was going to hit his back, and 𝐻/N punched her with her quirk. Hitting someone when their back was turned was cowardly. She doesn't like it when it becomes unfair. Katsuo smirked. He was finally in the right and yelled, "Let's beat their asses." Just like that, a brawl began. Emiko kicked someone who was going to hit 𝐻/N. She was not going another day without her best friend. Akio smirked while his eyes sparkled. He loved these kinds of displays. This is so manly. He then hit a kid. It was one going after Emiko, so it was okay since men don't hit girls. Akane smiled and shot acid at the floor. She didn't want to hurt anyone, but sacrifices had to be made. A boy fell into the hole and Akari shocked him. She was giggling as the kid looked like a smoking chicken. Rai used his earplugs to shock some boys who were going for his sister. However, he overused his quirk and went into his dumb mode. Like father, like son, it seemed. His sister gasped as the kids fell, not realizing they were going to hurt her. Hisoki brought him behind him. He wasn't going to allow his friends to get hurt. He needed to get to Emiko and 𝐻/N. He just couldn't get past those kids without hurting them. Quite a predicament. He was getting frustrated by all of this commotion. It was quite uncivil, but he looked over at 𝐻/N. She didn't realize that the two-toned boy was looking at her. She kicked another person and ended up back-to-back with Katsuo. Don't get in my way, Deku. 𝐻/N nodded while punching a boy in the stomach. I'm going to get in so much trouble. She sighed, ignoring his words. Katsuo rolled his eyes and smirked. Well, I will protect you from getting hurt because that's what a hero does. 𝐻/N smiled. That was the first nice thing he had ever said to her. She turned to him while dunking a punch. She tripped the boy who threw it. Promise, Katsu. Katsuo rolled his eyes while launching an explosion into a boy's face. He thought promises were ridiculous, but the look in her eyes made him agree. Promise, crybaby. 𝐻/N nodded while hitting a boy who was trying to get Rai. Hisoki grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him. She gasped, not realizing that it was Hisoki that grabbed her. Hisoki sighed, feeling relieved that she was okay. He frowned slightly from the few bruises and scratches she had, but everyone else looked worse. 𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐼 was also behind him while keeping Akari and Rai from wandering the place in their dumb state. 𝐻/N grabbed Rai and 𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐼 sent her a grateful look. They each took a sibling so they wouldn't get hurt. So manly. This is awesome, the Kirishima siblings said, together while punching boys. Their dad would go on about his manly adventures and deeds, so now they have one to tell him. Anyone who was watching this scene unfold could tell that this group was destined for trouble. Hisoki lifted his hand about to do something as someone got too close when a voice rang out. Stop this instant. Everyone in the lunchroom stopped at once. Like a prairie dog looking for a hawk's, they looked around from where the voice was coming from. They saw the voice come from their homeroom teacher. She looked furious with this entire situation. She walked over to them and pulled Katsuo off of 𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐼. 𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐼 was bloody and bruised. His lip was bleeding and so was his nose. He had a black eye and scratches with burns on his arms. He looked like he got into a fight with a toaster and lost. Katsuo was fighting back against her, trying to get back to the brat. He yelled about how it was unfair and how he hadn't finished teaching the boy some manners. The teacher gave him a stern look and tried to get him further away from the beaten boy. The Kirishima twins were now behind Hisoki. Hisoki stood tall like he was the only thing keeping the group safe. The teacher sighed, knowing she didn't get paid enough to deal with this. In her exasperation, Katsuo got out of her hold and stood beside 𝐻/N. He crossed his arms, looking at her, and she seemed okay. He would never admit it, but he was quite worried about how well she'll fare against people. You 8, go to the principal's office. I'll help these boys go to the nurse. All of your parents are going to be called. Katsuo teased and led the group, who hung their heads in shame. The worst was 𝐻/N, who looked like she was going to cry. They sat down in the office. The siblings sat next to each other, and Katsuo sat next to 𝐻/N, who was mumbling. I'm going to get in so much trouble. Daddy's going to get mad at me or extremely worried, maybe both. Mr. Ida is going to give me an earful, and I might get grounded. I can't believe I joined in. I mean, they deserved it, but maybe I should have sat out like Hisoki. Daddy's going to be so upset. I do not want to get in trouble. Maybe I should. I mean, not only did I use my quirk, but I harmed others. I know that must have hurt, and if it was me I would have run away instead of getting beaten up. Even though that Monoma kid was getting on my nerves, maybe I should have stopped Katsu from fighting him. Wait, no, I would have gotten hurt, then the boys would have gotten hurt anyway. Katsuo rolled his eyes and pinched her arm, making her stop mumbling. Stop that, Deku. 𝐻/N wondered why he kept calling her daddy's hero name. She didn't ask but watched as the Kirishima siblings had big smiles like they weren't afraid of getting in trouble. The Kaminari siblings were giving the thumbs up with weird smiles, making 𝐻/N giggle. Maybe it wasn't so bad. Hero kids were fun to be around. Meanwhile, with the dads, while this was going on, Izuku walked into the office after defeating a villain, expecting to assign the paperwork to his sidekicks, but he saw presents and banners. The big overhead banner said, "Congratulations on becoming a father." It must have been custom-made from the little All Might on the corner of the banner. Izuku looked around to see his friends. His eyes swelled up with tears. He didn't deserve so much support. Thank you guys. I appreciate this much more than I can verbally comprehend. Shoto nodded, and Bakugo rolled his eyes. Open the DM inboxes. We decided, since your dumbass didn't have anything for a brat, we would help your sorry but out. It was his idea, not that he was going to tell him that. Izuku had tears in his eyes as he opened each present. He grabbed a red-wrapped box of medium size that was right on top. That's from me. Isn't it so manly? It was the whole gang's hero costumes as onesies. Izuku saw his hero onesie and smiled. Thank you guys so much. Shoto nodded before saying, Finish opening them before you cry. Izuku wiped his eyes and snuffled. Everything was just so thoughtful, and he didn't know what he would do without them. He looked at the onesie of his hero costume in his hands and wished that he can be the role model All Might was to him to his daughter. He wants to be her hero. Izuku nodded and opened each present. He walked over to a huge box with a matching set of smaller boxes. It was a wooden wardrobe that had carvings on the side with brass handles. It has drawers on the bottom with flowers carved into them. Izuku opened it and saw inside it was a whole thing of little girl clothes that were sorted by size and season. It should easily last them through 3 growth spurts. Izuku looked at the clothes with tears swelling up again. It was too much. He knew how expensive it must have been, and there was more. He didn't know how to express his gratitude. 𝗏𝗱 cleared his throat. There are 2 more boxes. Open them. Izuku did just that, and the bigger box was a bed frame. It was a twin bed that was metal but had a plush headboard that was a green that matched Izuku's hair. Izuku opened the other box to see a memory foam mattress with a bedding set on top of the box. 𝗏𝗱 shrugged. Momo and I couldn't agree. I wanted to do the bed and she wanted to do clothes, so we got both. Izuku placed the wrapping aside and hugged 𝗏𝗱. 𝗏𝗱 awkwardly patted Izuku's back as Izuku mumbled about how he could never pay for his kindness and how he will be in his debt. He then went on about how he would make sure it gets used to its fullest potential. Denki then grabbed Izuku's hood, pulling him back. My present next. Even though Todoroki's makes mine look totally lame. Denki called out and Izuku nodded. I am grateful for anything, I doubt it's lame. He went and opened the box to see posters and hair clips of heroes. Izuku carefully went through the posters to see it was some of the limited edition ones from everyone's agencies. He stopped when he saw the special one of him and All Might. He looked over to see themed hair clips of each of them. Lighting bolts, rocks, an explosion, glasses, ice, fire, and his smile. He looked over at Denki and thanked him in a much calmer manner than he did with 𝗏𝗱. He placed the hairpins inside of the wardrobe and jumped when 𝗏𝗮𝐻 yelled. Move aside, extras. It's my turn. Izuku turned quickly, noticing the orange wrapping paper of a Gantt box, a medium box, and 5 smaller ones. It was beyond overboard. 𝗏𝗮𝐻 smirked and said, Open mine, it's the thing best. Izuku nodded and opened the box. It was a wooden desk that somehow went perfectly with the wardrobe. It had the same flower and vine carvings on the drawers. It was defiantly something that was made to last and for someone much bigger than his Dorfter. Izuku tried not to cry as he mumbled, Kakin, but 𝗏𝗮𝐻 just shoved the medium box at him. Izuku opened it to see a notebook, sketchbook, pencils, color pencils, crayons, scissors, glue, pencil sharpeners, ink, a brush, and reading beginner books. This is so much. Izuku started to cry as he looked at his childhood friend. 𝗏𝗮𝐻 didn't like his crying, so he just shoved the rest of the presents at him. Each box held a different type of shoe. The first one was standard tennis shoes that was modeled after him. The second was froppy rain boots. The third was a bigger pair of tennis shoes. The fourth was running shoes modeled after Ida, and the final was flats that had a flower buckle on it. 𝗏𝗮𝐻 just smirked and crossed his arms. I think told you it was the best. Izuku had tears streaming out of his eyes. He tried to hug 𝗏𝗮𝐻, but 𝗏𝗮𝐻 sidestepped him, letting his friend fall face first. Don't mention it, nerd. He muttered, walking over to Kirishima, who muttered something about it being manly. Ida rushed in with a huge box. He bowed. I am so sorry for being late. I have brought the cool items that your daughter will surely enjoy, as it is the top products that the Ida family trusts. He handed the box to Izuku, who stumbled a bit at the unexpected weight. Open this. Izuku stopped crying and opened the box. It was quite large, and on top it was a fluffy rug that had flowers on it. He took it out to reveal matching pillows and regular memory foam pillows. He looked below it to see a comforter that was a light green and some throw blankets. Below the blankets were stuffed animals: a fox, a cat, a dog, a bird, and a flower. Then there was more learning books and a portable computer with a mouse. As fun as the other items are, a good education is the most fun a child can have. It is my duty to help you supply said education to her. Izuku had streams of tears flowing out of his eyes and said, Thank you all so much. Kirishima smiled, and Shoto nodded. Ida nodded, and Bakugo rolled his eyes, but then his phone rang. Who the F is it? His eyes widen. The brat did what? I'm on my way. One by one, they picked up their phone, and they rushed out of the building. I'm coming, my baby. Izuku jumped inside of his car and sped to the school. My kids are so awesome. Kirishima smirked and fist-bumped Denki as they went inside their cars. With the kids, the principal just got the story of what happened from Hisoki and sighed. Your parents are on their way. She had no remorse and seemed quite exhausted with the entire situation. It wasn't often that a fight of this scale breaks out. She swears with each generation it's harder to handle. She walked out of the office into her personal chambers as if that could stop the threatened lawsuit. As she left, 𝐬/N shrunk behind Katsuo. He was calm but didn't mind her laying her head on his shoulder. What he did mind was the endless mumbling she started. He's going to kill me. Katsuo rolled his eyes. He believed that it was useless to get so worked up about something. He didn't voice this off and on as it was clear that it wouldn't help. The Kirishima children still has smiles on their faces as if they didn't believe they did anything wrong. In a swift movement, Akane grabbed 𝐬/N from behind Katsuo and wrapped her arm around her. Katuso was about to yell at her when Akane spoke. It will be fine. The way she spoke, it was as if she already knew the outcome. It made 𝐬/N feel at ease. With a smile, she pushed 𝐬/N's head onto her lap. Lay down. 𝐬/N blinked but didn't move. Katsuo muttered under his breath, but no one knew what was said. It was just clear that he was displeased. Suddenly, Izuku's voice echoing through the halls. My baby. 𝐬/N hoped that he would miss her and leave to go look somewhere else. Just like that, one by one, the rest of the dads came piling into the room, each looking around for their children, scanning them for the damage. Izuku nailed his daughter. She only had a few scratches and bruises here and there. He sighed in relief and rushed towards her. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Who hurt you, and who are their parents? Who started the fight? Did you fight in self-defense or not? Did you use your quirk? Did you overuse your quirk? 𝐬/N stood up quite dizzy as he started to shake her sometime between questions. She wasn't even sure when she got off of Akane's lap. One by one, the dads questioned their children, but it was mostly is anything hurt and if they were okay. The moms didn't know about any of this. Kirishima fist-bumped with his kids. Bakugo smirked. Beat their buttes. Katsuo mirrored Bakugo's smirk and nodded. That's my brat. Bakugo knew that he shouldn't have encouraged him, but it was better to have a winner for a son than a loser. Suddenly Katuso's attention was gained to the Midoriyas. Izuku was still shaking 𝐬/N, who looked like she couldn't understand a word being said. What a jerk, Katsuo thought and glared at Deku. He walked over, ignoring the confused look on his dad's face, and launched an expulsion to the back of Izuku's calf. He then said, Stop muttering, her eyes are swirls. I think you won that, won that round. Izuku rubbed his leg. That was not a weak explosion. Kaken's kid was just as scary as he was in his youth. Izuku quickly noticed how the other dads seemed to have formed a line behind the children's chairs and stood behind 𝐬/N. The principal then walked back out and cleared her throat. She did not like talking to heroes about this, as she had quite the respect for them, but it has to be done. Now, I know you were informed about the fight. All of the dads nodded, and the principal continued. It's shown on video that after a conversation with Koana, Katsuo started the fight. 𝐬/N joined in punching a kid who was going to attack Katsuo, who had his back turned. Imiko joined in punching a kid who was about to hit 𝐬/N. Akane joined in by using her quirk. Akane shocked the boy and Rai shocked the three boys who were trying to hit his sister. Akio hit a boy right after 𝐬/N joined in. Hisoki didn't hit anyone but was going to if they hit or hurt the people behind him. Koana had the most damage, and if it wasn't for the nurse's healing quirk, he would have gone to the hospital. These 8 had the least amount of damage and only needed some band-aids. Do you wish to see the video? She spoke pretty fast as it was a recap of what happened and why the punishment she was delivering was 𝐀𝐮𝐿. The dads nodded and they watched the video. Kirishima's smile grew, and Denki smirked. My kids are so awesome/manly. Bakugo laughed and Shoto sighed. Izuku watched how 𝐬𝐮𝐴 fought and muttered. You could use training. Your form was off and left many openings. Because the others were there, you didn't get hurt. Your quirk didn't injure you, but we should train that as well. That punch, you look okay. It seemed like you had been in fights before. Izuku muttered, and 𝐬𝐮𝐴 looked down, still thinking she would be in trouble. This is why your kids have to have an extended break from school. In 3 days, then they can come back. Dad's eyes widened in anger, and Bakugo said, You're going to suspend them. Over a fight they won. The principal sighed. To put it simply, the dad sighed, but Izuku spoke up. Hisoki didn't fight. Just because he was prepared doesn't mean he did. The principal nodded and looked over her notes. If you wish, he could be let off with just detention, but only he would be excused from the suspension. Shoto looked at Hisoki and shook his head. The principal nodded and smiled. That's all. Have a nice day. The dads rolled their eyes and knew they would have gotten a warning if it wasn't for Monoma threatening to press charges. Bakugo looked at 𝐬𝐮 and then nudged Katsuo. Bakugo knew what happened. How could he not after a 2-hour-long phone call with Izuku? All of the kids follow their parents, and the siblings may be in trouble when they get home. Katsuo pulled 𝐬𝐮 back from the group and said, I'm sorry for what I did. I am also sorry for bringing you into a fight. Now don't think I'm going soft. You're just a Deku. 𝐬𝐮 smiled and nodded. You're forgiven. Katsuo watched as she walked up to her dad and rolled his eyes. Bakugo could feel his heart stop. Brat, no. Katsuo raises an eyebrow. What the F are you talking about, old man? Bakugo hit his head and said, You'll figure it out by yourself. Denki suddenly stopped and said, How about we go to the zoo tomorrow? And we have 3 days to do some crazy fun stuff with the kids. The dads nodded, and Izuku looked down at 𝐬𝐮. Let's go home. Hisoki couldn't believe it. Katsuo said, I'm sorry. Also, did Katsuo have a crush on 𝐬𝐮? That could prove troublesome for him. His little girl jumped in excitement while her father laughed. It was refreshing seeing her so happy. It was time for a new adventure. He watched as she babbled excessively about her new favorite character, Tigger. It was from a children's movie that was released a few years back that portrayed many emotions as characters. The character was a loner, but they enjoyed having friends with their own identities. They were overjoyed and very excitable, the opposite of the girl in question. After ensuring they had everything they needed, they headed for the zoo. On the way up to the zoo, the car was filled with nerves from both parties. The father wasn't sure if it was a good idea to go to such a crowded place so soon. He looked in the mirror at his daughter who had her own reservations. She was worried that something might happen. She didn't know what, but she knew something would go wrong. It always did. Izuku took a deep breath and parked their car. He grabbed a bag so huge he seemed to match a kindergartner. He grabbed his daughter's hand and took a deep breath. It was going to be an experience. After they entered the establishment, 𝐬𝐮's eyes lit up as she looked at the different animal posters. They looked so cool, and she stopped at a specific one, the tigers. She looked into the animal's eyes with such curiosity it astounded Izuku. Izuku smiled as she spoke, Daddy, can we go see the tigers? His heart swelled as she referred to the animals as the character's name. He nodded, Of course we can go see the tigers after we find our friends. Izuku corrected her only briefly, and she nodded. She looked around for the familiar group of faces. After a few minutes of wandering around, a voice shouted, Izuku, over here. Izuku looked around sharply, his eyes landing on Denki, and smiled. He quickly made his way over with his daughter in hand. Izuku looked around and saw that he was the last one to arrive. Figures, he wasn't used to accompanying them to zoos. Shoto looked at 𝐬𝐮 and seemed confused. Midoryia, why is there a string attached to her breathes? There was a thick string attached to a keychain, one who had been there all day due to Izuku's paranoia. Izuku looked quite proud of himself as he smiled, so I don't lose her. Shoto blinked and took 𝐬𝐮 off of Izuku's string. She is a child, not a dog, Midoryia. 𝐬𝐮 tilted her head, and Izuku looked at Shoto. But what if Izuku started, but stopped as he saw Emiko grab 𝐬𝐻𝐵's hand and drag her to the group of children. Izuku then paused. He guessed it would ruin the experience if she wasn't able to have some independence. Akane wrapped her arm around 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and pulled her closer. "We should go to the bird exhibit." That reminded her about the one animal she did want to see. 𝐬𝐻𝐵's eyes sparkled and she asked, "Can we see the tigers also?" Katsuo smirked and nodded. "Yeah, and we will see the king of the jungle. Lions." Katsuo then paused. "Did you say tiger?" 𝐬𝐻𝐵 nodded, and Akio wrapped his arm around Katsuo. "We can see the sharks too." As if saying, "Leave it alone, it wasn't worth correcting." 𝐬𝐻𝐵 smiled and turned to the twins to see them bugging Denki for ice cream. Emiko smiled and asked, "We can see the monkeys too." Hisoki nodded and said, "We can do all of them." He knew logically it wouldn't be possible given the amount of time, but he didn't want to be the one to bring down the mood. Not when they all looked so happy. Mainly 𝐬𝐻𝐵, who explained what a tiger is to Katsuo. The group nodded, then Akio smiled. He just had the most fun and manly idea ever. "Let's do a race. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and I versus Hisoki and Emiko." Everyone turned to Akio. It did seem like fun, but there were only two skeptical about it. The Midoryas looked at one another as if to communicate, "Is this really safe?" Kirishima smiled. "Yeah. Be safe but win." Akio, feelings even more motivated from receiving support from his dad, bends in front of 𝐬𝐻𝐵, who looks a bit scared but got onto his back anyways. He adjusted her and smiled. "Are you okay?" She nodded, wrapping her arms around him. Hisoki did the same but a lot more careful with his sister. Shoto then said, "To the birdcage." Go. He wanted his children to win, but he didn't understand the need for competition at their age. They both took off trying to run as fast as they could. They didn't have any strength-type quirks, so they couldn't use those to their advantage. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 frowned as Hisoki got ahead of them. "Akio, stop," so he did, and she got off, confusing him. "Get on my back." He felt a little emasculated but got on anyways. Suddenly, with green lighting surrounding her, she took off like a bullet. Without much time passing, she got ahead of the twins, who looked at her shocked. One was more impressed than shocked though. Akio was holding on for his dear life, muttering how manly 𝐬𝐻𝐵 was. She touched the birdcage and cheered. Akio wasted no time getting off of her back and high-fived her. Izuku smiled as the kids followed to the birdcage. Kirishima bent down in front of 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and Akio and smiled. That was so manly. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 blinked and tilted her head. "I'm a girl." Kirishima opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Bakugo laughed, had it Kirishima, and Izuku sighed. Akane jumped onto Kirishima's back and yelled, "Womanly." Kirishima's eyes sulked and he nodded. "That was so womanly and manly." Izuku leads the group into the bird bridge and said, "Stay still so the bird can land on you." 𝐬𝐻𝐵 looked at the birds, then saw their claws. She turned to see that Akari and Rai already had birds on them. Hisoki had the most, and Emiko kept petting the ones on him. Katsuo was trying to hit any bird that came near him. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 didn't want to have any birds on her, so she hid behind Katsuo. "What the hell are you doing, Deku?" 𝐬𝐻𝐵 looked at the birds and said, "I don't want birds on me, and none is coming to you." Kirishima heard this and laughed. Izuku looked at them and walked over to Bakugo. "You think he will ever be mean to her?" Bakugo sighed and glared at a bird. "I don't think no. I don't want history to repeat itself. I did some fed-uppy." Izuku nodded and watched as Katsuo was batting birds. "We should probably leave before we get kicked out." The dads nodded and walked out. "We're going to see the monkeys." 𝐬𝐻𝐵 ran after her dad, and Katsuo walked behind her. One by one the kids followed. They stopped at the monkeys, and 𝐬𝐻𝐵 watched as they swung from branch to branch. Katsuo teased and Hisoki placed Emiko on his shoulders. Shoto saw this and smiled. Rai tried to stop Akari from climbing the cage. Denki smirked and joined his daughter. Rai sighed and said, "I'm telling Mom." Denki got down, and Akari was pulled off by Rai. Bakugo saw Katsuo staring at 𝐬𝐻𝐵, and he groaned. He doesn't want to be stuck with Deku for the rest of his life. Bakugo lifted Katsuo on top of his shoulder and said, "Stop making it obvious." Katsuo rolled his eyes. "Stop making what obvious?" Bakugo groaned and whispered so only Katsuo could hear. Staring at Deku's brat. Katsuo had a sudden blush to his cheeks and he shook his head. "I wasn't." "You need to get your eyes checked, old man." Pretending to drop him, making him grab Bakugo's hair. "You little." Izuku covered Bakugo's mouth and grabbed Katsuo from Bakugo. "No Kaken. There are kids here." Bakugo glared at Izuku, who uncovered his mouth. Katsuo saw 𝐻/N on her tiptoes trying to see the monkeys. He walked over to her and lifted her. "Hey, what are you doing?" Katsuo put her on his shoulders and said, "You're short but wouldn't see." 𝐻/N nodded and laid her hands on his hair. 𝐻/N's eyes sparkled as she saw it. Izuku smiled at this and mumbled, "I should have realized she couldn't see." Bakugo glared at Katsuo, thinking the brat did it to spite him. Izuku looked at the time and said, "We should go now, or we won't see the lions or tigers." The kids sighed, and the boys let the girls off their shoulders. Hisoki grabbed Emiko's hand and followed Shoto. 𝐻/N grabbed Izuku's hand and dragged him towards the cage of the lions. Katsuo smirked and ran to the cage. Well, it wasn't a cage but a little hole for the lions. 𝐻/N looked down and saw tigers on the other side of the hole. Why do they keep them together? 𝐻/N walked over to the tiger part and looked down. Izuku smiled and picked her up. He sat her on the glass and she looked down. Akane tugged on his breathes, and Rai picked her up, making Izuku drop 𝐻/N, "Daddy." Everyone looked at the falling 𝐻/N. Izuku tried to catch her but failed. Bakugo looked at Izuku, who cursed and clapped. "I'm proud of you." Izuku looked down, panicked to see a tiger caught 𝐻/N by the back of her shirt. 𝐻/N turned to see the tiger's face. Her face went pale. The tiger walked to the other tigers and faced them down in the middle. A female tiger stood up and sniffed her. She then kicked 𝐻/N, and then they all started to lick her. 𝐻/N giggled and started to pet one. Her eyes sparkled as the tiger let her pet it. Izuku almost had his soul leave his body. Shoto sighed and looked at the group of tigers. "It's safe to say she won't get hurt by them. How do we get her out?" Katsuki did and looked at Katsuo. Katsuo glared at Katsuki and he sighed. "You're a hero." Shoto faces them and Katsuki groans. "I'll get her." Shoto looked at Hisoki and nodded. "I'll help." Katsuki glared and jumped down into the hole. He stomped up to the tigers and said, "That's enough." The tigers growled at Katsuki as he got closer. Katsuki stared at them, then growled himself. The male tigers stood up and circled Katsuki. The females blocked 𝐻/N from Katsuki's view, baring their teeth. Katsuki sighed and mumbled, "Deku will owe me after this." Katsuki used his explosions and saw 𝐻/N in the middle. He jumped over the tigers who tried to bite him. He grabbed 𝐻/N by her shirt, and she clung to his hand. He threw her over his shoulder and blasted over the angry tigers. He ran back to the viewing edge. The tigers chased him, and he blasts himself up to the group. "Stop crying. Here's your brat." The tigers roared at him, and Katsuki rolled his eyes. Denki turned to Katsuki and said, "That was awesome. I have it on video." Katsuki rolled his eyes, and Kirishima wrapped his arm around Katsuki. "That's my best bud." Katsuki looked at Izuku, who was crying while holding a panicked 𝐻/N. "We should go." Everyone nodded, and Izuku followed with puffy eyes. "We are never going back to the zoo." 𝐻/N sighed. She liked the tigers. 𝐻/N's eyes sparkled as she held Izuku's hand. She looked around and saw everyone in hero costumes. She could see the heroes and retired heroes. Izuku said that it was for scouting interns. 𝐻/N ran up to the group dragging Izuku. Bakugo looked at 𝐻/N and sighed. "Try not to fall into any tigers." 𝐻/N looked down and then smiled. "I will try not to." A woman with blonde hair hit his head. "That's not cool. Be nice to the little darling." 𝐻/N hid behind Izuku and Izuku's side. 𝐻/N this is Cammy this is 𝐻/N. This one is Mina this is 𝐻/N. Jiro this is 𝐻/N and 𝐻/N this is Jiro. Momo this is 𝐻/N and 𝐻/N this is Momo. 𝐻/N smiled and went to the group of kids. Katsuo was making fun of Hisoki and Imiko was trying to stop him. Akio, Akane, Akari, and Rai was hyping Katsuo up. Katsuo smirked and pulled 𝐻/N towards him. Isn't Flame Brain stupid? Just like his dad. Weak, coward, quitter, and a bad brother. 𝐻/N's eyes widened when Hisoki went up in flames. Katsuo. He's on fire. Katsuo smirked and said, "This is when we run." Katsuo ran towards the stalls dragging 𝐻/N along with him. Hisoki was setting things on fire while he chased the two kids. Imiko was trying to calm him down but the rest of the kids brought out their popcorn. Katsuo ran through stalls and 𝐻/N tried to keep up. "Why are you dragging me around too?" Katsuo rolled his eyes. "Because it makes him even madder." 𝐻/N titled her head. "What do you mean?" Katsuo rolled his eyes once again but said, "Let's split up and hide." 𝐻/N ran to a poser stall and hid behind a big poster. Hiding from someone. 𝐻/N turned to see a boy with bright red hair and blue eyes. 𝐻/N glared and stepped back. "Who are you?" The boy chuckled and said, "Are you hiding from the one on fire?" 𝐻/N activated her quirk, having lighting surround her. "I will only ask one more time, who are you?" The boy rolled his eyes and said, "Dabi, now that's an impressive quirk, sweetheart." 𝐻/N glared at Dabi and punched his arm. "Don't call me that." Dabi laughed as Hisoki stopped, looking around for Katsuo. Dabi put his hands up in the give up. "Calm down." 𝐻/N heard an explosion and sighed. "Now I have to stop them." "By Dabi." Dabi grabbed her arm and asked again, "What's your name?" 𝐻/N sighed and said, "I'm 𝐒𝐮𝐿 Midoryia." With that, she ran towards the fighting duo. Katsuo spread smoke around Hisoki who had the fire around them. The dads were trying to stop them but Denki went inside the dumb mode. The Kaminari twins were keeping their dad from running into a stall. Kirishima looked at his kids and said, "Stand back." Izuku was looking for 𝐻/N and Bakugo was cheering for Katsuo. Shoto was trying to keep Imiko away from the fire. 𝐻/N jumped in the middle and yelled, "Stop." The boys stopped at once and looked at her. She turned to Katsuo and said, "You shouldn't have made him mad just because it's funny." She turned Hisoki and said, "You shouldn't let him get under your skin and you shouldn't drag me into it." Green electricity surrounds here and the smoke disappeared. The same thing happened with the fire. Bagwo looked at 𝐻/N and Shoto was surprised. Izuku nodded in approval and picked her up. "We need to watch the Hero Festival." The dads shook their heads. "We are so going to get kicked out." The dads left with the kids. Where were the moms? At the sports festival talking about how dumb their husbands are. Someone watched the whole thing and smirked. "So she has a powerful quirk, pretty, and knows how to handle idiots. I wonder how dad will like her." They walked away and left the festival. Oh, how they were planning, but will they succeed? Izuku looked around and sighed. He had to go to work but don't want to cause anyone any problems. An idea hit his head and he smiled. 𝐻/N get dressed, you're meeting someone. 𝐻/N looked at Izuku with curious eyes. Meeting, Daddy. Izuku just smiled and said, "Someone super duper nice." 𝐻/N smiled and ran into her room. Now that Izuku thinks about it, his apartment is quite small to be raising a little girl in. I have to fix that soon. He grabbed 𝐻/N's tiger bag and smiled. She begged him for it after they left the zoo. To be honest, he was considering a child leash but then realized that it was his fault she fell. While he was thinking 𝐻/N was putting on an onesie. She wanted to be like pro hero Dynamite. Well, Katsuo's dad, after he saved her, she started to idolize him. Well as studying his moves and how he used his quirk. Father like daughter, I guess. She finished putting the onesie on and smiled. She looked at her hair and glared. She hated her hair, it looked just like 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴𝐿's. It made her mad just by looking at it. Oh well, Izuku wasn't going to allow her to diet. She put an explosion-themed boy in her hair and walked out to see Izuku mumbling. 𝐻/N smiled and tapped Izuku's leg. Daddy, I'm ready to go. Izuku smiled and picked her up. Let's go. 𝐻/N then yelled. Beyond plus ultra. Izuku chuckled and went to the car. They pulled up to a small house painted green and Izuku got out. Whose house is this, Daddy? Izuku just smiled and took her little hand in his. He walked up to the door and knocked. A few crashes were heard and a green-haired woman answered the door. She had a few white and silver hairs, but it didn't make her look too old. My baby, you didn't tell me you were visiting. She was just about to hug him when she caught sight of 𝐻/N. She blinked and looked down at her. And who are you? 𝐻/N smiled and said, My name is 𝐻/N Midoryia, ma'am. The woman's eyes sparkled as she looked at her. You have a baby. And you never even told me. Izuku Midoryia. Izuku's sweat dropped as the women kneeled. Call me 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. 𝐻/N's smile grew and she hugged 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨. Izuku smiled and said, I kinda need you to watch her while I do hero work. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 smiled and nodded. Of course. I love my little bean. Ko looked at 𝐻/N again and asked Izuku. Why is she so small? Izuku sighed and said, I don't know, she may have been born early or it may just be in her DNA. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 nodded and then asked, Why is she wearing Katsuki's hero costume? Izuku smiled. He saved her 2 days ago from some tigers at the zoo. She started to idolize him as I used to do. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 nodded and grabbed 𝐻/N's bag. I'll be back around 5. Bye mom, bye sweetheart. 𝐻/N waved as he drove off. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 turned to 𝐻/N and asked, Do you want to bake some cookies? 𝐻/N smiled and walked inside with 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 set the bag down in Izuku's old room and led 𝐻/N towards the kitchen. She smiled at her and asked, Do you have a quirk? 𝐻/N smiled and nodded. Yep. I can make green electricity from my body, be super strong and fast. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's eyes widened. It sounded a bit like Izuku's, but what was the mother's quirk? 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 quickly smiled and got the step stool. Okay, I have some pre-made cookie dough I was going to use tomorrow. We can make hero-themed cookies. 𝐻/N suddenly had an idea popped in her head. Can we also make cupcakes? 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's eyes sparkled and nodded. We can make tiny cookies to go on top of the cupcakes. It can be the top 10 heroes. 𝐻/N nodded and they started to shape the cookies. So, Deku is number 1. 𝐻𝐿 is number 2, 𝐀𝐮𝐱𝐡 is number 3, 𝗬𝗏 is number 4, 𝗲𝗡 is number 5, and we can do an Erasure Head and All Might. There's the bird hero, 𝗏𝗏 and Toga, but she's a villain. 𝐻/N didn't know most of them but just smiled. We can do them. After all, it's just cupcakes. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 nodded and they put the cookies in the oven. 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ put the white frosting into 10 bowls. We need to make the colors. Here, let's make the dark green first. 𝐻/N nodded and grabbed the food dye. 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ nodded and said, For drops, then stir. 𝐻/N nodded and added the amount. It turned to a light green, making her frown. Perfect. We can use it for 𝗲𝗡. 𝐻/N's smile returned and 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ smiled. Let's do the dark green, 7 drops. 𝐻/N added the drops and stir. Seeing the dark green, she smiled. I did it. 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ smiled and nodded. Want to do the red now? We have to have 2. 𝐻/N nodded and placed the green down. 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ handed her the food dye and said, 5 drops and stir. 𝐻/N nodded and added the amount. 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ held the bowl and 𝐻/N stirred. Her eyes sparkled as they created a light red. Perfect. We can use it for All Might and Red Riot. 𝐻/N nodded and 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ smiled. Add 8 drops to this one. She handed her a bowl and 𝐻/N did the drops. She stirred and her eyes sparkled when it created a dark red. Perfect. That can be used for Shoto's red half. 𝐻/N smiled and grabbed the yellow. She added 2 drops and 𝐀𝐮𝐭o̗ smiled. She stirred it and it created a blonde color. Perfect bean. This can be used for 𝐻𝗏 and Toga. 𝐻/N smiled and grabbed the pink. Add 3 to this bowl and 7 to that bowl. 𝐻/N did what she was told and then stirred. It created light pink and dark pink. That's for 𝐬𝐻. We need to make purple and a dark blue. 𝐻/N nodded but saw no purple. She grabbed the blue and added 7 drops to the frosting. She stirred and it created the dark blue. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled and said, "Put 3 drops of blue in the frosting." 𝐻/N did what she said and was about to stir when 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 handed her the red coloring. Add 2 drops of red. 𝐻/N added the red and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled. Stir. 𝐻/N stirred and saw a very light purple. We only need 1 more frosting. Add 3 drops of black to the white frosting but leave 1 bowl white. 𝐻/N added the black frosting and stirred. She placed the bowl down and smiled. She looked over at 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 to see she already frosting the cookies. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled and grabbed plastic bags. "I'm going to do this part alone." 𝐻/N smiled even though she felt like frowning. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled and frosted the cupcakes. 𝐻/N watched as she put them together and sighed. She wandered off not wanting to be there anymore. She went inside Izuku's old room and saw it was bare, only a small computer in the corner. She powered on the computer to see a video pop up. She watched the video but then it crashed. She walked out to see the cupcakes were done. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled at 𝐻/N like she never left the kitchen. 𝐻/N put a smile on her face and grabbed the Tupperware from 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 smiled, then there was a knock. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 left 𝐻/N alone once again and she looked at the cupcakes with a sad smile. She wanted to help more, after all, she just did the frosting color. Nothing else. Izuku walked into the kitchen to see the smile. What was wrong? He would never know. He knows that 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 was nice, right? Izuku put a smile up and grabbed her. "I'm here." 𝐻/N smiled and handed him the cupcakes. "𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 made these." Izuku's brows furrowed. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 said they made it together. 𝐀𝐮𝐿 said you helped. 𝐻/N looked down and Izuku smiled. "I love them, thank you." 𝐻/N smiled that fake smile again. They left and Izuku asked, "Didn't you help with the cupcakes?" 𝐻/N looked out the window. "Not really, all I did was the frosting color. She didn't let me do anything else." Izuku nodded as he drove. He didn't know why she was upset. Did she want to do more? Why didn't 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 let her do more if she asked? Wait, did she even ask? 𝐻/N didn't want to get up, all she wanted to do was be with Izuku. Why did she have to go to school? It seemed like all she ever brings is bad luck. 𝐻/N shook her head and smiled as she put on her Deku hoodie. She put on a black skirt with green tights. 𝐻/N walked out to see Izuku was waiting with her backpack and lunchbox. "I can't walk you today, but I can drive you." 𝐻/N smiled and went inside of the car. Izuku dropped her off and she walked to the group. "Hello." 𝐒𝐮𝐵 smiled and Akane jumped on her. Down, down, down they fell onto the grass and Akio smiled. He jumped on top of them and Hisoki sighed. "Get off of her, you're crushing her." The twins sighed and got off. Hisoki helped her up and she smiled. "Thank you. Good to see you too. 𝐻/N let go of Hisoki and the bell rang. "We should go to class." They nodded and 𝐒𝐵 grabbed her hand. 𝐻/N smiled, feeling all of the negative thoughts flow away. 𝐒𝐵 pulled 𝐻/N into the classroom and they sat down. "Good morning, class. Today we are doing a partner day. This is where you have to get along with your partner. This means no fighting." She aimed it at the groups furthest away from one another. Katsuo rolled his eyes and mumbled, "Not my fault they can't fight worth it." 𝐻/N smiled and kicked his leg softly. Katsuo glared and the teacher continued, "I will pick your partners and you have to spend all school day with them. The only time you can leave their side is if your different genders are in the bathroom." Everyone nodded and she smiled. "Look on the board and you will see your partner's name." Everyone stood up and raced up to the board. 𝐻/N was getting pushed around but Hisoki grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the crowd. "I can see your partner on the board right here." 𝐻/N smiled and Hisoki looked. "I'm partnered with Kirishima and you're partnered with Bakugo." 𝐻/N smiled, "Thank you." Hisoki nodded and Katsuo dragged 𝐻/N from her hood. "Let's go, Forest." 𝐻/N wondered why he called her Forest. Hisoki saluted her and 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐴 smiled while waving by. Katsuo walked out of the classroom still dragging 𝐻𝐿 out of it. Emiko looked at Rai and asked, "Is she going to be okay?" Rai sighed and said, "I don't know. But we should probably keep an eye on them." The group nodded and walked out altogether. Katsuo dragged 𝐻𝐿 to the PE room and saw the locker room. "Let's just stay in our regular clothes." Katsuo nodded and went to the pits. The coach looked at the partners and sighed. "Why over half of you not changed and sitting on someone else's dot?" Hisoki spoke up and said, "Ms. ##### said that we can't separate from our partners." The coach sighed and said, "We're going to play dodgeball, everyone separate in even teams." Katsuo dragged 𝐻𝐿 to the left side of the gym, then everyone ran towards them. Hisoki grabbed Akane's arm and said, "Sit. That is stupid and frankly, it's more fun when you're not on his team." Akane smiled and said, "That's so manly." Akio's head snapped turns them and grabbed Akari. "We should go with them." Akari sighed and let Akio drag her to the small group. Rai looked at Emiko who attached herself to 𝐻𝐿. The group split up. Katsuo had a dark smirk making the right side shiver. "Let's beat them in the ground." 𝐻𝐿 sighed and the couch smirked. "You're allowed to use your quirks." Katsuo looked at 𝐻𝐿 and said, "You better use your quirk, Forest." 𝐻𝐿 looked at them and sighed. But it can hurt them." Katsuo had an evil look on his face and said, "They will be fine, we will win and you will use your quirk." 𝐻𝐿 sighed and hid behind Emiko slightly. "Okay." Katsuo looked at Rai and Emiko. "You two better do it too." They nodded and the couch had an amused smile on her face. She blew the while and everyone ran for a ball. 𝐻𝐿 sighed and saw Hisoki waiting. She caught a ball that was thrown at her and threw it back with green electricity around it. It took about 2 girls. "Sorry." Katsuo spread his smoke around and then made a smoke screen. The whole left side took ball and threw them at the left side. 𝐻𝐿 kept saying sorry when she threw the ball. Katsuo pulled her aside from a ball on fire. 𝐻𝐿 watched as Emiko's fire panda ate the fire and Emiko grabbed the ball. Thank you." Katsuo smirked and threw a ball. "I did say I was going to protect you, didn't I?" 𝐻𝐿 nodded and pulled Katsuo away from another fireball. "Why is Hisoki targeting you?" Katsuo glared and said, "I have a pretty damn good idea why. Now go take out the twins." 𝐻𝐿 nodded and threw 2 balls in the twins' direction. Akari took the ball for Akane but Akio's hit him in the stomach. "Thank Almighty harden it." Katsuo smirked and mouthed something at Hisoki. Hisoki created 5 balls then lit them on fire. He threw them and everyone ducked. 𝐻𝐿 pulled Katsuo down and the ball hit the wall. Hisoki was now on fire and created more ball. Katsuo stood up and threw ball at him. 𝐻𝐿 ran from Katsuo and then went inside of Hisoki's blind spot. 𝐻𝐿 grabbed a ball and Emiko smiled while taking care of a dumb Rai. 𝐻𝐿 threw it at full strength almost breaking her finger. Hisoki's eyes widened when he saw the ball coming for him. It was too late but 𝐻𝐿 yelled, "Sorry." Katsuo laughed as Hisoki fell against the foam walls. Everyone turned to 𝐻𝐿 who was now beet red. "Sorry." Katsuo rolled his eyes and threw more ball. The kids fell and the coach blew the whistle. "It's lunchtime. The left side wins." Katsuo smirks and grabs 𝐻𝐿's hoodie sleeve. "Good job, dumbass." 𝐻𝐿 turned to Hisoki's direction and asked, "Will he be okay?" Katsuo rolled his eyes and said, "He'll be fine, the worst is a bruise. Now let's eat." 𝐻𝐿 followed and grabbed her lunchbox. They sat down alone, the group didn't join them. They weren't allowed to. Katsuo saw that her lunch was Deku's costume themed. Katsuo ate his lunch while 𝐻𝐿 ate hers. Katsuo waited till she finished her lunch then stood up. "Let's go play." 𝐻𝐿 nodded and put away her lunchbox. Katsuo dragged her to the monkey bars to be stopped by Koana. "Huh. You have to be stuck with a girl who has cooties." 𝐻𝐿 tilted her head and asked, "What's that?" "I am sure I am up to date with all of my shots." Katsuo waited till Koana explains. All girls have them. You can't take a shot to get rid of them. Dummy. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐴 glared and said, "You're the dummy that got beat up by 8 kids. You made fun of." 𝐬𝐮𝐴 rolled his eyes with his cheeks dusted with red. All girls have them, you can get them by touching them or kissing them. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 rolled his eyes. She doesn't have cooties. You're just a dumbass. 𝐬𝐮𝐴 then smirked and said, "Is that so? She does, every girl does." 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 placed his hand on top of 𝐬𝐻𝐵's head. "See? No cooties, now leave us alone." 𝐬𝐮𝐴 chuckled. "I said you have to kiss them to get it." 𝐬𝐻𝐵 rolled her eyes and said, "Do you have cooties?" 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 smurked as Kohana's face twisted in anger. "No. You do." 𝐬𝐻𝐵 pouted and 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 leaned down to kiss her cheek. "Katsu, do I dash?" Her eyes widen when his lips landed on her own. 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's eyes widen and Kohana's jaw dropped. He did it." 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 quickly muttered out. I didn't mean to." They ran away from one another and 𝐬𝐻𝐵 took Emiko away from Rai. 𝐬𝐻𝐵, what are you doing?" 𝐬𝐻𝐵 looked at her and dragged her inside. "𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 kissed me. I need to wash my mouth out with soap." Emiko's eyes widened, but she knew her brothers saw the whole thing. They went inside of the bathroom and she watched her mouth out. Emiko never saw someone do it willingly. They went inside of the nurse's office and 𝐬𝐻𝐵 used her quirk, making her finger turn purple. Emiko's eyes widen. How badly does she want to avoid 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨? They stayed at the nurse's office and 𝐬𝐻𝐵's finger was healed. They left and 𝐬𝐻𝐵 tried to creep past the group. That wasn't very manly. Why are you avoiding him? Just because he kissed you. Izuku's voice was heard. Who kissed 𝐬𝐻𝐵? They all turned and saw an angry Izuku and 4 dads behind him. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 froze and Emiko grabbed her hand. No one. Emiko answered, then dragged 𝐬𝐻𝐵 behind Shoto. Kirishima looked at Akio and smiled. You know it would be super manly if you told us. Akio's eyes sparkled and Akane was about to stop him when he blurted out. 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 kissed her. Bakugo dropped his coffee and Izuku's face paled. Bakugo grabbed 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's face and rubbed it roughly. Do not kiss Midoriya's. Do not kiss anyone. Izuku looked at 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and she quickly said, I already rinsed my mouth out with soap. Don't get mad at me. Izuku sighed and Shoto was wondering why they were hiding behind him. Why did 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 kiss you? Emiko piped in and said. 𝐬𝐮𝐴 said she had cooties and 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 wanted to prove she didn't. Izuku sighed knowing he was going to give Monoma a very strong worded letter. Izuku grabbed 𝐬𝐻𝐵's hand and said, We are going to the dentist and the store. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 nodded and followed him. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 couldn't make eye contact with 𝐾𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 without blushing on the cheeks. The teacher sighed. Today we are doing a play. Alice in Wonderland. No one can choose who they want. It's on the board and it was picked randomly. Hisoki looked at 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and said, I'm the king and you're the queen of hearts. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 smiled and nodded. You have all day to learn your lines, now go outside. Everyone went outside and 𝐬𝐮𝐴 followed 𝐬𝐻𝐵 and Hisoki. Hisoki turned around and asked, Why are you following us? 𝐬𝐮𝐴 scoffed. I am your sidekick and we have to learn lines. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 got behind him and yelled, Off with your head. 𝐬𝐮𝐴 jumped and Hisoki chuckled. She has her lines down. Now I wonder how Bakugo is faring with being Alice. 𝐬𝐻𝐵 thought for a moment and asked, How do we act like villains? Hisoki stopped for a moment, then 𝐬𝐮𝐴 rolled his eyes. What, you want us to go meet real villains? 𝐬𝐻�'s eyes darkened but her smile remained the same. That's an amazing idea. Emiko came to her and her role as a white rabbit. Yes, Your Highness. 𝐬𝐻� smiled and said, If the teacher asks where we are, don't tell her but stall her. Emiko smiled and nodded. Hisoki rose an eyebrow as 𝐬𝐻� walked to the fence. Wait, are we doing it? 𝐬𝐻� nodded and started to climb the fence. Of course, grab him before he tells. Hisoki looked over at the sneaking away 𝐬𝐮𝐴 and sighed. Hisoki knew he had a soft spot for her but carried the struggling 𝐬𝐮𝐴 over the fence. Where do we go now? 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 asked behind on his feet again. I know a place where villains hang out. They won't hurt us through. Hisoki looked at her and asked. How do you know they won't? 𝐻/N smiled and said. I used to live there before going to find Daddy. Hisoki nodded and 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 was about to run back to school. 𝐻/N stopped and got a dark look on her face. Either you stop trying to be a snitch or we will use you as a trade to a different villain group. Hisoki smirked as 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 stopped and walked along with them. 𝐻/N walked into an alleyway and the boys followed behind. Hisoki lit the way and 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 asked. Wasn't your grandpa #1 hero? Isn't your dad #1 hero now? 𝐻/N looked over her shoulder and said. So, my mother is a villain. Hisoki nodded. My uncle's a villain. 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 paled and whispered. I'm stuck with 2 insane villain kids to meet villains, for a play. 𝐻/N stopped at an old bar and knocked. Let me in if... Hisoki nearly choked. 𝐻/N just cussed. 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 was about to run when 𝐻/N glared at him. The door opened to reveal a misty figure. Oh, Ms. 𝐻/N, and you brought friends. I thought you went to find Izuku. 𝐻/N nodded and dragged 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 in by the shirt. I did, but these two need to learn how to be a villain for a play. Before the misty man could answer, a squeal was heard. 𝐻/N. 𝐻/N's eyes widened and she pushed 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 to the floor, then jumped behind Hisoki. A blonde lady fell to the floor. 𝐻/N. You're so mean. I just want a hug. Hisoki looked at the creeped-out 𝐻/N and got fire in his hands. I don't want to hug a vampire wannabe. The chuckled was heard and 𝐻/N turned to see 𝐬𝐻. Hey, scarfs. He stepped out and picked her up. Hey, twerk. 𝐻/N sat on his shoulder and Hisoki sighed. Hey, Uncle 𝐬𝐻. 𝐬𝐻 looked at Hisoki and sighed. Hey, Hisoki. A small boy whined and tried to get 𝐻/N and /N. You're back. 𝐻/N clung to 𝐬𝐻 and glared. Get away from me, 𝐀𝐮⁴ He tried to climb on 𝐬𝐻's leg when the blue fire was shot at him. Sweetheart said no, and what she says goes. She groaned and said, I told you not to call me that, Dobby. Hisoki grabbed 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐻 once again, then created a child leash. Why didn't you do that in the first place? Hisoki shrugged and placed it on him. 𝐬𝐻 set 𝐻/N down and Dobby smirked. Aw, is the sweetheart upset? 𝐻/N rolled her eyes and shot lightning at him. It hit him directly and sent him to the floor. I said don't call me that. 𝐬𝐻 sighed, knowing how short her temper can be with them. Why you here, shorty? 𝐻/N turned to Shigaraki and said, Hey, handyman, we need to teach these boys how to be villains. It's for a play, Alice in Wonderland. The villains nodded and Tamura whispered something to Kurogiri. Kuro nodded and smiled. We need to get you all dressed as villains. 𝐻/N just get into your old clothes, we'll handle the boys. 𝐻/N nodded and whispered to Hisoki as she was walking by. Don't let your guard down. Hisoki slightly nodded and dragged 𝐻𝐮𝐻 towards 𝐬𝐻. 𝐻/N went inside of her old room and rolled her eyes. They touched my stuff. She grabbed an outfit and got changed. They even changed my clothes. Whatever, I'll just put a black mask on. 𝐻/N walked out to see Hisoki was wearing a black hoodie and black jeans with a mask. 𝐻𝐮𝐻 was wearing a rabbit costume. 𝐻/N heard footsteps on each side of her and jumped up. It was Toga and 𝐀𝐮⁴. She landed on their backs and walked to Hisoki. Why is he in a costume? An arm wrapped around her and she saw Dobby. He wouldn't wear any of the clothes we picked, so Hisoki made him this costume. Is that good enough? Sweetheart. 𝐻/N stomped on his foot and kicked his back. Copycat. You're a dumbass. 𝐻𝐮𝐻 knew that what his name meant but glared. I'm not you are. 𝐻/N blankly looked at him and said, I'm not the one in a costume like a dumbass. 𝐻/N walked to 𝐬𝐻 and asked, Where are we bringing them? 𝐬𝐻 sighed and said, I was thinking about robbing a bank. Dobby should come along too, he could help to keep Goldilocks at bay. 𝐻/N nodded and said, Okay, but not the BLD twins. 𝐬𝐻 nodded and 𝐻/N grabbed Hisoki's jacket sleeve, who grabbed 𝐻𝐮𝐻's leash. Come on, we're leaving. 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐴 sighed in relief and 𝐬𝐮𝐻𝐿 smirked. To rob a bank. 𝐻𝐻𝐿's eyes widen and 𝐻𝐿 sighed. Don't panic or we will give you to them. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 glared at him and 𝐬𝐿 followed 𝐬𝐿 out. 𝐻𝐿 followed and 𝗬𝐵 lit his hand up. Keep moving Goldilocks or you'll turn into rabbit stew. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 gulped and looked at 𝐬𝐿. 𝐬𝐿 was sticking by 𝐬𝐿 and 𝐻𝐿, they were lighting the way. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 was about to copy 𝗬𝐵's quirk when 𝐬𝐿 glared at him. Don't even think about it. 𝗬𝐵 rose an eyebrow and she spoke. He can copy people's quirks by touching them. 𝗬𝐵 glared at 𝐻𝐻𝐿 and made the flame hotter. Is that so, bunny boy? 𝐻𝐻𝐿 sighed and just let 𝐻𝐿 drag him. They saw a bank coming closer and 𝗬𝐿 smirked. We will show you how it's done, then you copy. 𝐬𝐿 grabbed 𝐻𝐻𝐿's leash and said, You better not rat us out. Remember, you're a part of this too. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 nodded and 𝐬𝐿 threw the leash to 𝗬𝐵. You're in charge of him. 𝗬𝐵 smirked evilly and 𝗬𝐿 lit his hand on fire. Get down. This is AF goddamn robbery. 𝐬𝐿 pushed 𝐻𝐻𝐿 forward and 𝐻𝐿 sighed. Put the money in the bag so we can leave. The lady nodded but then 𝐻𝐻𝐿 snapped. Faster, put the demon money in this bag. 𝐬𝐿 nudged 𝗬𝐵 and whispered. Told you he would snap. 𝗬𝐵 watched as the lady put the money in the bag and whispered. We are taking the money, right? 𝐬𝐿 slapped his head. No, this is just to experience being a villain, not being one. 𝗬𝐿 sighed and grabbed the bag. Go outside. 𝐬𝐿 dragged 𝐻𝐻𝐿 out and the two boys followed. What is Uncle 𝗬𝐿 doing? 𝗬𝐵 muttered. Sweetheart said to return the money because this isn't a real robbery. It's bullshit. 𝐻𝐿 sighed in relief and 𝐬𝐿 watched as 𝗬𝐿 walked out. Let's get you three back to the school. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 smiled and 𝐬𝐿 shook her head. We'll have to change our clothes back. At least you want to be a bunny in front of the whole school. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 ran back towards the hideout and 𝐻𝐿 sighed. 𝐬𝐿 groaned and yelled. I wouldn't do that, dummy. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 didn't stop so 𝐬𝐿 used her quirk and grabbed his leash. 𝐬𝐿 yanked him back and he fell. Do you want to die? 𝐻𝐿 sighed again and 𝗬𝐵 smirked. I have a feeling this isn't only about the play, spill. 𝐻𝐿 nodded and said. She doesn't want to confront 𝐒𝐮𝐽 because he kissed her yesterday. 𝗬𝐵 stopped and 𝗬𝐿 had wide eyes. Who kissed her? 𝐬�L's face went pale and she grabbed 𝐻𝐿. I have no idea what he's talking about. Suddenly a boy with pale blue hair with yellow eyes spoke up. He said it was 𝗑𝐮𝐽. Isn't that right, Prince? 𝐬� glared and the two boys went in flames. Oi, why did you do that? 𝗬� shrugged and smirked. I think you know, princess. 𝗬 sighed and rolled her eyes. Just because I beat your butt doesn't mean you have to be a sore loser. 𝗍𝐿 noticed she was still holding his hand and 𝗬� noticed too. Is that so? Why are you holding 𝗍𝐿's hand? 𝗬 rolled her eyes and dragged 𝗍𝐿 towards her room. 𝗬� glared at 𝗍𝐿 and 𝗬𝐵 glared at 𝗬�. You see, 𝗬𝐵 and 𝗬� has been competing for 𝗬 since they met her. 𝗬 grabbed her clothes for school and handed 𝗍𝐿 a bracelet. Wear that until we leave. Don't trust the togas, they eat BLD for their quirk. She then pushed him out of her room and changed. She walked out to see everyone was in the clothes they came in with. She smiled and waved. Bye. 𝗬 grabbed the leash and dragged 𝐻𝐻𝐿 out while 𝗍𝐿 was wondering how she could change personalities so fast. Off with his head. King, set it on fire. Katsuo, who was Alice, was tied up and 𝗍𝐿 set the things around him on fire. Minion, throw the rest in jail. 𝗻𝐻𝐿 smiled evilly. Get in the demon's cell faster. 𝗬𝐵, 𝗬𝐿, Toga, 𝗬𝐿, 𝗀𝐻𝐿, Tamura, and Kiriguri was there cheering. Izuku cheered for his baby and 𝗑𝐮𝐽 laughed. This is finally getting interesting. Denki looked at 𝗀𝐮𝐽 and asked. When should we capture the villains? The villains heard this and sighed. Izuku was recording, then the curtains fell. Put the fire out. The villains disappeared but the heroes didn't care. Shoto was proud of his son and Emiko was just sitting next to 𝗬 the whole time. Izuku was surprised that she threw her friends into the cell. Monoma nearly fainted when his son cursed. Izuku was concerned. How did 𝐻/N know the villains? Why do they seem so attached to her? Did something happen before she knew Izuku? Why does she seem to be like 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 then like an angel? Was it her mom? Why did she hate being called a princess? Doesn't every little girl want to be a princess? How did she learn how to fight? Izuku hasn't started her training. It wasn't him who taught her, so who did? 𝐻/N was in her room. She was grounded for bringing the boys to villains. Izuku looked at 𝐻/N's door and sighed. What am I going to do? There's so much I don't know about her. Am I a bad father? I don't know where she was even raised at. Was she raised with villains? Is she a villain? Izuku's eyes widened as he came to that conclusion. Izuku looked at 𝐻/N's door and looked down. Was her mother a villain? Or did she find the villains alone? Is the note even real or even recent? Izuku went to the kitchen and began to cook. 𝐻/N glared at the floor. Why was she in trouble? They didn't even have a scratch on them. She looked at the window and sighed. She wanted to jump out, but she didn't want to go see 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 or Toga. She just wasn't in the mood for that. But she looked around and noticed this apartment is very old. 𝐻/N got off her bed and dug through her drawers. She brought out a necklace, the necklace 𝐬𝐫 gave her before she went searching for Izuku. He said it would bring her good luck. He didn't steal them either. He gave her a green while he had the blue one. She smiled and put it on. She was afraid Izuku would question it, but she couldn't care less now. 𝐻/N smiled softly and looked out the window. She could leave, maybe go to a park. No, that would freak Daddy out. 𝐻/N used to never care what others thought about her, but she felt like she needed to prove herself to Izuku. Izuku finished cooking. It was F/F. He knocked on her door and 𝐻/N answered it. Let's go eat. 𝐻/N's eyes widened. He didn't smile or even had a happy tone. He must be very upset with her. She followed silently and Izuku stopped. We need to talk before we eat. 𝐻/N nodded and Izuku sat down on the couch. 𝐻/N sat on the chair and Izuku got straight to the point. How do you know those villains? 𝐻/N's eyes widened and she looked down. They took care of me. Izuku's eyes widened and asked. What do you mean? His eyes landed on the necklace on her neck. What is that necklace about? Did you steal it? 𝐻/N's eyes had a look of despair. He thought she was a villain. She glared. No. It was a present. Izuku nodded and asked. From who? 𝐻/N blankly stared and said. Why does it matter? Can't trust me anymore. Izuku nodded and said. Yes, I should have never trusted you so easily in the first place. 𝐻/N's eyes brimmed with tears and said. Is that why you hid it and quit it with 𝐻/N? Izuku's eyes widened. How did she know about that term? We agreed for it to be a one-time thing. 𝐻/N nodded and said. Maybe your pull-out game shouldn't be so weak then. Izuku's eyes twisted with anger. Did you ran away? 𝐻/N's eyes widened in anger and yelled back. No. The beach left me. You wouldn't know 𝐻𝐮𝐿 because you didn't care enough to ask. Izuku glared and yelled back. I wanted to respect your privacy. 𝐻/N looked away and said. I don't care if you want to know, fine. Izuku's eyes widened and 𝐻/N started to talk. I was around 3 at the time, 𝐻/N she left. She was meeting a man before and suddenly she left. She used to call me princess, and the reason why was because I always needed help. All I had left was the note and $20. The house was an old one and had almost no food in it. I spent the money on food and, after 2 weeks it was gone. I was forced out on the streets. Forced to steal for living, rough life for a 3-year-old I was hiding from a man I just stole from in an alleyway. Suddenly a voice spoke up. Hello, little girl, why are you stealing? I looked to see a misty man and I glared. Why do you care? Misty man nodded. A young girl shouldn't steal. Where are your parents? I looked down and said, 𝐻/N left me and my dad I never met. The misty man nodded and said, my name is Kirigiri and I can give you a temporary home until you find your dad. I smiled and followed him. I had nothing to lose, life wasn't worth living at that point in time. He introduced me to everyone, They were all nice. Soon after I turned 4, my quirk appeared. They figured out who my dad was. 𝐻𝐿 was already obsessed with me, so was her son. She was over the moon when she found out I was your love child. When I turned 5, I went searching for you. 𝐬𝐵, 𝐶𝐮's son, gave me this. He has a matching blue one. He bought it with money and didn't steal it. I started to search for you, and after a few days, I found you. That's my story, my truth, and I'm leaving now. 𝐬𝐿 ran into her room and Izuku looked at the ground. I called her a villain. She isn't a villain. I yelled at her and invaded her privacy. Hell, the villains were better parents than I am. Izuku looked at the food that wasn't eaten and sighed. 𝐬𝐿 packed an overnight bag and jumped out the window. She didn't want to be near Izuku right now. She'll stay the night with the villains. At least they don't judge her for what she did. She went inside the hideout and 𝐂𝐮's eyes widened. Why are you back here, kiddo? 𝐬𝐿 looked down and said, Izuku knows the truth now. He got mad at me and I got mad at him. 𝐂𝐮 nodded and he smiled. You can stay the night, we can even teach him a lesson. 𝐬𝐿 smiled and shook her head. Thanks though. 𝐂𝐮 watched as she went inside her room. 𝐬𝐵, go see if she's okay. She opens up to you the most. 𝐬𝐵 nodded and went inside the room. Izuku knocked on 𝐬𝐿's door, but no answer. He sighed and said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get upset and call you a villain. Please, open the door. No reply, not even a noise. 𝐬𝐿, sweetheart, I didn't mean it. Please, just open the door. 𝐬𝐿. That got Izuku considered and he opened the door. Empty, no trace of her. The only sign that she left was a bag was missing and some clothes. Izuku fell to his knees. His daughter left him just like 𝐻𝐼RICA left him. Where is she? Izuku cried and punched the floor. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized she ran to the villains. Hopefully she'll come back tomorrow or he'll go get her. 𝐬𝐵 opened the door and saw the green necklace around her neck. Hey, are you okay? Do I need to set someone on fire? 𝐬𝐿 shook her head and said, Izuku got mad and called me a villain. I then told him how I got here and how I found him. He was so angry at me. Even before we talked. He just assumed I was a villain and I was lying to him. 𝐬𝐵's fist clenched with anger. You're not a villain, and he's an idiot. 𝐬𝐿 nodded but still had the sad look on her face. 𝐬𝐵 sighed and climbed into her bed. He hugged her and said, You're not a villain. You're a hero. 𝐬𝐿 started to cry and said, He also said that I was a thief and that he shouldn't have trusted me. 𝐬𝐵 hugged her tighter as she cried in his arms. Deku will pay, either it's now or later. He shouldn't have called her a villain and made her cry. Extra. 𝐂𝐮 walked into the room to see 𝐬𝐵 and 𝐬𝐿 cuddling. 𝐬𝐵 was holding her close and 𝐬𝐿 had tear stains on her cheeks. 𝐂𝐮 saw 𝐬𝐵's hands were clenched a bit. So he fell asleep angry. 𝐂𝐮 placed the blanket over them and saw the matching necklaces. He smiled. 𝐬𝐵 begged him to buy them, not steal them. 𝐂𝐮 turned off the lights and closed the door. Deku just made a group mad that he shouldn't have made mad. Just wait, you'll pay for what you have done. 𝐬𝐿 woke up and tried to rub her eyes. She couldn't move, so she opened them to see red hair. 𝐬𝐵. What happened? She suddenly remembered what happened yesterday and sighed. She hugged 𝐬𝐵 and 𝐬𝐵 opened an eye. What are you doing, sweetheart? 𝐬𝐿 just hugged him tighter. He was always there for her. Even when they first met, he was the reason she survived so long with them. Flashback: I was walking around the hideout. Toga kept appearing out of nowhere. 𝐬𝐿 was too shy to talk to the kids and the adults thought she was too soft or too weak to keep her. She was talking with Kiri and smiled. Thank you. Kiri nodded and he knew he had a soft spot for her. Kiri thought of her as his child. He was the only one without one after all. Only he knows who her father is. Aoi pushed her slightly and walked away. 𝐬𝐿 never did anything about it, but that would change soon. Today was her birthday after all. 𝐬𝐿 felt herself get anger by the second and she mumbled, Don't push me. Aoi stopped and smirked. Or what? You're going to cry and hope someone saves you. Prince. 𝐬𝐿's eyes burned with anger, and she felt some power surging through her. Don't call me princess. Always took a step towards her, not seeing the light green marking appearing on her skin. What would happen if I don't? Prince. 𝐻/N lifts her hands and shot something out of her palm. Her eyes widen as Aoi was thrown against the wall. Green lighting surrounds 𝐻/N. Her finger was broken and she winced in pain. She has a quirk. Tuya's eyes widen and Toga's eyes turned into hearts. It's like my Izuku's quirk. Tamura looked at 𝐻/N and scratched his neck. How long since you have that power? Aoi groaned and said, okay, so the princess has some bite to her bark. 𝐻/N made eye contact with Kiri and he sighed. She just got it. Tamura scratched his neck faster and said, who's your father? 𝐻/N looked down and handed him the note. Tamura looked at it and said, I can't read it. Dabi-1 read it. Tuya sighed and grabbed the note. Her mom left her, and Izuku Midoryia is her father. Tamura glared at 𝐻/N and said, we have been housing a hero's kid. Tamura's eyes widened and he smirked evilly. I have a perfect idea. Toga hugged 𝐻/N close and shook her head. No. She's too cute to be a villain. She would be cuter with some BLD on her. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 grabbed 𝐻/N from his mother and hugged her. No. She will stay. Tuya covered his mouth and kept his laughs from coming out. Tamura glared at the Togas and sighed. Fine, we will do a vote. Who wants her to stay? Toga, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, Tuya, and Kirigiri put their hands up. Tamura glared at them and said, who wants her to leave? Tamura raised his hand and Aoi did too. Tamura looked at Dabi and said, stay or leave. Dabi looked at his dad and said, stay. Tamura glared at the girl between the Togas. You're staying, brat. 𝐻/N smiled and Toga squeezed her cheeks together. 𝐻/N was getting irritated as the Togas clung to her. 𝐻/N then shocked them both and they fell. Kiri looked at the three while the Todorokis laughed at them. Kiri looked at her injured hand and Dabi said, I'll lead her to the nurse's office while you get the bandages. Kiri nodded and Tuya raised an eyebrow. Dabi leads her to the nurse's room and looked at her finger. Does it hurt? 𝐻/N rolled her eyes and said, no, of course not. I just broke it and it doesn't hurt. Dabi smirked and said, oh, does the sweetheart has some backbone? 𝐻/N rolled her eyes and said, don't call me that. Dabi opened the door to the room. Listen, you need to learn how to fight or you'll be dead meat girly. 𝐻/N looked down and said, okay, so. Dabi sighed and said, I'll get my dad to train you and I'll protect you till then. 𝐻/N looked at Dabi with curious eyes. Why would you do that for me? Dabi smirked and said, so I can be a hero for once. Your hero? 𝐻/N smiled and Kirigiri showed up with bandages. Flash black ended, are you going to get up? 𝐻/N hugged him and shook her head. No, I want to hug my hero. Dabi's eyes widened with a blush spread across his cheeks. Why, you still remember that? 𝐻/N smiled and sat up. Of course. Tuya leaned against the door while keeping the two Togas from entering. I shipped them. Toga glared and shook her head. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 is perfect for her. Tuya rolled his eyes and shook his head. He's crazy. 𝐻/N pointed to the door and Dabi sighed. You want to go home? 𝐻/N's mood dropped and looked away. I don't know. Dabi hugged her again and said, he's your dad and he probably knows you're here. He'll apologize and cry. He is a big crybaby. 𝐻/N laughed while tears fall from her eyes. Okay. Dabi frowned even though she only shows her soft side to him. He hates seeing her cry, it just doesn't suit her. Dabi wiped her eyes and smiled. Don't cry, it doesn't suit you, sweetheart. 𝐻/N nodded and hugged him once more. I guess I should go home. Dabi smiled and opened the door. Togas fell and Tuya stared at Dabi. So, when are you two going to kiss? Dabi rolled his eyes and closed the door behind him. Not happening, Dad. 𝐻/N got changed and walked out to see breakfast ready. You have to eat before you leave. Kiri said and 𝐻/N nodded. She sat down and began to eat. Kiri waved by as she left. Tamura glared and mumbled. Why do you all like her so much anyway? 𝗧𝗧𝗟 rolled his eyes and said, because she's an angel. Toga smiled and nodded. She's amazing. 𝐻/N crawled through her window to hear voices. Has she came back yet? She then heard Izuku's panicked voice. No. Maybe I should get a tracker. I know she's safe, but does she hate me? She identified the voice to be Shoto, and then another voice showed up. She doesn't hate you. Stop being a goddamn crybaby. It's your fault for calling her a villain. 𝐻/N's eyes sparkled as she heard Katsuki's voice. She ran out of her room and jumped onto his back. Katsuki's eyes widen as she climbs on his shoulders. I like Mr. Katsuki better. Shoto's eyes widen and he saw Izuku's river tears. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have 𝐻/N had a dark look in her eyes. Call me a villain. A thief. A bad person. Hitting it and quitting it. Getting mad because you hit it and quit it. Shoto's eyes widen and Katsuki's eyes widen as he stopped to laugh. He held her legs and whispered, I love this kid. Shoto saw Izuku's pale face and he froze. Why? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gotten mad and they didn't get hurt. You never got hurt there and I may have been a horrible father. 𝐻/N looked at him and played with Katsuki's hair. Horrible, terrible, mad, angry, bad, deadbeat, but, beach, jerkface, deechbag, but, sperm donor dash. Katsuki nearly dropped her from laughter and Izuku was now sulking in a corner. 𝐻/N grabbed his hair, not dealing that Katsuo was there, and was laughing with Katsuki. Shoto looked at her and asked, Can you insult my father? Izuku nodded and said, Okay, so I have been a terrible father, but please forgive me. 𝐻/N held onto Katsuki's hair and sighed, Why should I? Bakugo sniffled a laugh, and Izuku panicked. I am here. His face turned into all mites and everyone burst into laughter. Shoto chuckled slightly and 𝐻/N said, Fine. But call me a villain one more time and I'll show you one. Bakugo looked at 𝐻/N and said, When are you going to get down? 𝐻/N looked down to see Katsuo and shook her head. No, and why are you three here anyways? Bakugo groaned and said, Deku was being a goddamn crybaby saying his baby ran away. His baby hates him. 𝐻/N nodded and smiled. Oh yeah, Mr. Shoto Tuya says hi. Shoto nodded and asked, How's Dabi? 𝐻/N smiled, He's good. Bakugo grabbed 𝐻/N and threw her to Izuku. We are leaving. Bakugo took Katsuo's hand and dragged him out. Shoto walked out after him and Izuku looked at 𝐻/N. Please forgive me. 𝐻/N smiled and Izuku hugged her. I'll keep you no matter what. 𝐻/N hugged him and said, Promise. Izuku nodded and said, Promise. Izuku held 𝐻/N's hand and asked, Are you sure? You want to watch her? Shoto nodded and said, Yes, besides she makes me laugh. Izuku hands 𝐻/N to Shoto as if she was $1 billion in a suitcase. Shoto watched as Izuku went inside his car. He looked down at 𝐻/N and said, Are you ready to insult my father? 𝐻/N smiled and nodded, Yes, Mr. Shoto. Shoto walked her inside to see 𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐽 talking to Hisoki. So, how's your Quirk training going? Hisoki looked like he was dying. Emiko spotted 𝐻/N and ran towards her. 𝑁/N. Hisoki's head turned to them and he mouthed to Shoto. Help me. Shoto shook his head before he noticed that Emiko dragged 𝐻/N into the playroom. Grandma Rai. This is my friend. Her name is 𝐻/N Midoryia. Rai smiled softly and said, Nice to meet you 𝐻/N. 𝐻/N's eyes sparkled and she smiled. Hi. Nice to meet you too, Ms. Rai. Rai's smile softens and she said, Do you two want to bake cookies? 𝐻/N smiled and Shoto came. 𝐻/N want to do it now. Emiko looked at 𝐻/N but was shocked as she had an evil look in her eyes. Shoto smiled, making Rai and Emiko worried. Shoto leads 𝐻/N to the training room to see 𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐽 and Hisoki in there. 𝐭𝐮𝐬𝐽, before he could even say anything, he scoops 𝐻/N into his arms. Who are you? Are you Hisoki's girlfriend? What's your quirk? Who are your parents? 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻 shocked him and he placed her down. Slow you roll, old man. 𝐭𝐮𝐻's eyes widen and he turned to 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. She's feisty. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 was about to answer when 𝗪𝗱𝗱 cleared his throat. They turned to him and he said, 𝐬/N has something to tell you. 𝐭𝐮 turned to 𝐬/N and she had her evil look on her face. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's eyes widened and he ran behind 𝗪𝗱𝗱. 𝗪𝗱𝗱 was behind 𝐬/N ready to protect her at any given time. Mr. 𝐭𝐮, I have something to say. He kneeled and nodded. What do you want to say, kid? 𝐬/N smirked and said, You're a horrible father, you're the reason your family hates you. You are the villain, not 𝗬𝗧 because you drove him into being a villain. You are a bad person. You should take a hard look in the mirror but you can't because all the mirrors you look at broke. If I wanted to kill myself I'll climb your ego and then fall to your IQ. You are a trash can on fire. Have you been speaking English? Because all I hear is bullshit. You want to see a failure take a picture because you're not going anywhere. You may think that you're a great father but you are a horrible father. 𝗬𝗧 is a better father than you. You treat women like they are objects. Well, news flash beach, we are queens. We are not crazy, you just made us that way. You are a scumbag and a complete pages. I know why you're a huge PP, it's because yours is so small. You're my favorite person besides everyone else on this earth. You're the reason the middle finger was created. I envy people that never met your sorry but. You're kinda like Rapunzel but instead of letting your hair down, you let everyone down. You're not the dumbest person on this planet, you better hope he doesn't die. You look like your father would be disappointed in you if he stayed. You are a pizza burn on top of the world's mouth. Did your butt ever get jealous from the SHT coming out of your mouth? You're so dense, even light bends around you. You should put a condom on your head because if you want to act like a PP might as well dress like one. Your face looks like it was burned with fire and pulled out with chains. Your mother may have told you that you could be anything you wanted, but a douchebag wasn't what she meant. If there was a single intelligent thought in your head it would have died from loneliness. I don't have the time or the crayons to explain this to you. Your BRTH certificate is an apology from the condom factory. If you could SCK your PP then you would finally SCK at everything. If you were any dumber then someone would have to water you twice a week. 𝐭𝐮 lit up in flames and 𝐬/N had electricity around her. Did someone forget to water you today? 𝗪𝗱𝗱 laughs and 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 was wide-eyed. If you hit me my dad can get you in jail. I mean, child abuse is real, you know. 𝐭𝐮 glared and said, like anyone would believe you. 𝐬/N smirked and said, I'm pretty sure everyone will. I mean, Deku is my dad. 𝐭𝐮's eyes widened and then a knock was on the door. 𝗪𝗱𝗱 grabbed 𝐬/N and she smiled sweetly. Bye, Mr. 𝐭𝐮. Bye, 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. 𝗪𝗱𝗱 opened the door to see a huge smile on 𝗪𝗱𝗱's face. I love your child. Izuku looked at 𝐬/N and nodded. That brat. 𝐭𝐮's voice echoed and Deku had a back feeling that it was the cause of 𝗪𝗱𝗱's smile. 𝐬/N yawned again and grabbed Izuku's hand. Why are we up so early? Izuku picked her up, wrapping the tiger tail around her. Izuku got her a child leash because he was worried, but it's a plushy leash. 𝐬/N yawned and wrapped her arms around Izuku's neck. Izuku rang the doorbell to hear this from the other side of the door. Your girlfriend is here. An angry voice chimed after. She's not my girlfriend, old man. A female voice then said. I want to meet her. She must be 𝗧𝗪𝗱𝗪𝐴. Is she caught Katsu's attention? The door swung open to reveal a blonde lady with an angry Katsuo behind her. Bakugo was snickering and he glared at Izuku. Why do I have to help you? Demonda. Izuku covered 𝐬/N's ears and nodded. Thank you, 𝐀𝐮. I need help finding a house. Bakugo glared at Izuku and took 𝐬/N from his arms. I am only putting up with your dumb ass for her. He looked down at the sleeping girl and then handed her to Katsuo. Izuku nodded and asked. Whose car are we driving? Bakugo grabbed his jacket and keys. No way in hell I'll get inside an All Might-themed car. Izuku watched as Katsuo carried 𝐬/N on his back. Why the F did you plan this so early? I mean it's 7 a.m. Izuku smiled nervously. I figure after we found a house that I should go shopping and move everything. Bakugo placed 𝐬/N in a booster seat and 𝐀𝐮𝐭 next to her. It could have waited till even your kid is sleeping. Izuku got in the passenger seat and saw 𝐀𝐮𝐭 falling asleep. Where is the first house? Izuku put the address into the phone and Bakugo began to drive. This is AF merge. A few minutes went by, then he yelled. You did not just cut in front of me. I will beat your butt. Izuku watched as the kids fell asleep, not being bothered by the yelling. Go back to F drivers ED. Maybe if you let more oxygen to your brain you will be able to drive correctly. Izuku looked at the time and only 40 more minutes to go. Is this the farthest house? Izuku nodded and said, why yes. Katsuki 𝐶𝐮𝐬𝐴 and got stuck behind a slow driver. Get off of your goddamn phone. It's AF 75 speed limit not. Izuku was wondering how the kids were able to sleep through the yelling. What did your drop you even you were a baby? Izuku sighed in relief when Bakugo pulled into the exit. The drive was quiet until Bakugo said, we need to do something about the brats. Izuku looked at them and saw that 𝐬/N's head was on 𝐀𝐮𝐭's shoulder. 𝐀𝐮𝐭's head was resting on 𝐬/N's. What do you mean Kakin? Bakugo stopped the car and said, my brat has a crush on your brat. Izuku's eyes widened and his face paled. What? Bakugo got out and Izuku did too. If you want to deal with me for the rest of your life we need to figure out how to stop it. Izuku unbuckled 𝐬/N while Bakugo got 𝐀𝐮𝐭. Wake the F up brat. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 jolted up and exploded Bakugo's hand. F. 𝐬/N buried her face into Izuku's neck while mumbling. Loud, shut the F up. Bakugo snapped his head towards the Midoriyas. What the F did you just say? A dark aura surrounded her and she lifts her head. I said shut the F up, porcupine. Bakugo glared at her and said, I don't take orders from twerps. 𝐬/N zapped him and said, you do now. Bakugo glared at her and Izuku opened the door to the house. It had a long hallway that leads to some stairs. This thingy, Izuku looked at, saw a small living room. He sighed and climbed the stairs. She could get hurt going to her room. Bakugo rolled his eyes and grabbed 𝐬/N. He set her on the couch and said, stay with this brat. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 rolled his eyes and sat on the couch. Why can she sleep? I'm tired too. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 glared at 𝐬/N but then his eyes softened. Bakugo pointed at them and whispered, to do something. Izuku then whispered back. Like what? My baby doesn't have a crush on 𝐀𝐮𝐭. Your child has a crush on mine. This is your problem. Bakugo glared and Izuku walked inside of the living room. We are driving to another house. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 nodded and placed the sleeping 𝐬/N on his back. Bakugo glared and closed the door behind everyone. This better just be a phase. Bakugo got inside of the car and Izuku finished buckling up the kids. Before he would let Izuku in he drove away. Izuku tried to open the door but Bakugo backed up. This lasted for a few minutes until Izuku glared. Kakin, stop it. Bakugo finally let Izuku in and rove to the next house. It was only 10 minutes away from his own house. 𝐬/N unbuckled herself and let Izuku help her out. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 got out on his own. They went inside to see a small living room and stairs. That's a lot of stairs. Izuku muttered but Bakugo smirked. This is awesome. Izuku grabbed 𝐬/N from going upstairs. Is it safe? Izuku looked around at all of the windows and stairs. Look at this way. The brat won't be able to sneak out so easily now. Izuku's eyes lit up and 𝐬/N groaned. I hate this. Bakugo sent an evil smirk towards 𝐬/N. 𝐀𝐮𝐭's eyes widened as they went into the basement. Bakugo's smile widens as he saw the pool table. If you're not buying this I will. Izuku's smile grew just a bit but then he remembered 𝐬/N. She was coming down with 𝐀𝐮𝐭 behind her. She was gripping the ledge and Izuku grabbed her. I may have to put a gate there. Bakugo snorted and they went back up. Izuku's eyes widened and he said, there's 2 living rooms. Bakugo grabbed 𝐬/N and ran up the stairs. 𝐀𝐮𝐭 followed his dad, leave Izuku there alone. Izuku followed quickly and opened a door. This is a bedroom. Bakugo smirked as he threw the kids on the bed. It doesn't seem to hurt them. Izuku's eyes widen as 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 landed on the pillows. The bed is small. Bakugo looked at Izuku and said, "You can buy a new one." Izuku nodded and 𝐬𝐮𝐴𝐵 kicked 𝐀𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 off of the bed. Bakugo snorted when 𝐀𝐻𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 face planted. "Huh. I love this kid." Izuku walked out of the room and everyone followed him. 𝐬𝐶 didn't even take a step inside of the room. "I hate this room." Izuku's sweat dropped and Bakugo kneeled. "Oh, are you not a princess?" 𝐬𝐶 smirked and zapped him. "No, I'm a hero." Izuku sighed and flicked her forehead. "No cursing." Izuku dragged her away from the shocked Bakugo. Cat was laughing at him. "The brat not only zapped me but cursed at me." Izuku left and opened a different door. "We can decorate the princess room, okay?" 𝐬𝐶 nodded and opened a door. Izuku looked around the laundry room and smiled. "I think we may buy this house." 𝐬𝐶 walked out and opened another door. Izuku followed to see Cat dragged Bakugo out of the princess room. Bakugo stood up and walked towards 𝐬𝐶. He picked her up and said, "You cursed at me. A Deku cursed at me." 𝐬𝐶 pointed at the door and he opened it. "It's just a wait, is that a jacuzzi bathtub in a hallway bathroom?" Bakugo looked Izuku in the eye and said, "I will buy this house if you don't." Izuku nodded and grabbed 𝐬𝐶. "There's an attic." Bakugo brought it down and looked at the children. "Katsuo, take 𝐬𝐶 outside to the backyard." 𝐬𝐶 ran downstairs with Katsuo followed her. "Holy shit." Izuku nodded and walked around. "You think 𝐬𝐶 will be able to come up here?" Bakugo snorted, "Hell no. She's so short a mouse is taller than her." Izuku sighed and said, "Why is it so quiet?" Bakugo's eyes widen. "Oh, All Might, please don't let my brat do anything bad." 𝐬𝐶 ran outside to see a pool. "That's a huge pool." Katsuo smirked and said, "Have you learned how to swim?" 𝐬𝐶 turned to Katsuo and nodded. "Yeah, but..." Katsuo pushed her into the pool and she screams. Splash. Katsuo laughed and Izuku yelled. "What happened?" Bakugo sighed. "You didn't." Katsuo waited till 𝐬𝐶 popped up. Her hair was wet and she doggy paddled to keep herself up. Izuku jumped in after her and grabbed her. Bakugo threw Katsuo in the shallow end and said, "You brat." Izuku got out and grabbed Katsuo. "You are not allowed in the pool or near it ever again." Katsuo was grabbed by Bakugo. Izuku looked at his child and sighed. "We need to change." Bakugo nodded, holding Katsuo by the shirt. "You're not getting in my car soaking wet." Izuku used his quirk and went home. Bakugo looked at his brat and slapped his head. "Why the F did you push her?" Katsuo sighed and said, "Because. I don't know." Bakugo slapped his head again, but then a dry Izuku and 𝐬𝐶 showed up. "Here are some clothes for Katsuo." Bakugo pushed Katsuo into the outdoor bathroom. "Let's go check out the rest of the house." Izuku nodded and walked back inside. Izuku walked into the kitchen and set 𝐬𝐶 down on a high chair. Izuku looked around and smiled. "I may buy this one." Bakugo looked at Katsuo, who just came in. "Go seat at the dining table." Izuku grabbed 𝐬𝐶 and walked into a different room. "Is this a theater room?" Bakugo looked around and said, "I am coming over here a lot." Izuku's sweat dropped as Bakugo sat down on a chair. Izuku nodded and found a wine cellar. "I am buying this house." Izuku called the person and began to buy the house. "Extra. This is your room after redecorated. And your bathroom." Izuku looked at the sleeping child and shook her quietly. 𝐬𝐶, "Sweetheart, please wake up." 𝐬𝐶 groaned and flipped over. Izuku sighed and opened the curtains. 𝐬𝐶 groaned and rolled over. Izuku looked over to see 𝐬𝐶 on the ground with the blanket on top of her. Izuku picked her up and said, "We have to go to the Christmas party." 𝐬𝐶 titled her head. "What's Christmas?" Izuku's eyes widened and he smiled. "Christmas is where you get presents from Santa." You spend it with loved ones and friends. 𝐻/𝐿 nodded and Izuku got out an outfit. Here's your costume. Please get changed. 𝐻/𝐿 walked out of her bathroom and saw Izuku in a matching Santa suit. Daddy, why you dressed like Santa? Izuku smiled and picked her up. Because it matches your costume. 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and then asked, Daddy, why don't you have a wife? Everyone has one except you. Izuku's smile fell and he said, I was going to marry a woman before you were born. She ended up cheating on me. A year after that I had you. 𝐻/𝐿 nodded and Izuku walked downstairs. Whose house are we going to? Izuku climbed inside of the car and 𝐻/𝐿 buckled herself. Shoto's, he always hosts the Christmas parties. 𝐻/𝐿 looked down and asked, Can I give presents to Dabi, Tuya, Himiko, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and them? Izuku paused and sighed. Sure, but we will leave it at the door with a note. No going in to see them or else I will end up doing my job. 𝐻/𝐿's smile grew as she played with the green heart. Yay! Izuku's heart melted but it stopped when he heard Bakugo's road rage. You goddamn mother F. You don't know how to drive. Get off your phone. He quickly drove past him and Bakugo yelled. Deku. Kami hit his head and Izuku pulled into Shoto's driveway. 𝐻/𝐿 got out of the car with Izuku's help and they rang the doorbell. Momo opened the door with a warm smile on her face. Hello, glad to see you could make it. Please come in. The kids are playing in this room, 𝐻/𝐿. 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and walked into the room. Everyone was in different costumes. Himiko was a deer. Rai was an elf and Akari was matching him. Hattori was wearing a Santa-themed costume, matching her own. Akio was a snowman and Akane was a snowflake. A few moments Katsu came in with a Santa-themed costume as well. Katsuo looked at everyone and said, I have a plan. Care to join me? Katsu looked around trying to keep cursing to a minimum. 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and nodded. Sure, I'll help. What's your plan? Akio smiled and Himiko cheered. I want to help too. Katsu looked around and said, You all are helping, even Flame Brain. Hisoki looked at 𝐻/𝐿 and walked behind her. Himiko was clinging to her like always so it didn't seem too weird. Katsuo smirked and explained the plan. It was a wicked, evil, unruly plan but it seemed like fun. Well, for them at least not the person they are doing it to. Izuku looked around as everyone smiled, sober. Not a drink around but then among the males it went silent. Who's doing it this year? Izuku was confused and Bakugo walked away. Hell no. I did it last time. Kirishima sighed and frowned. I know this isn't very manly but I don't want to either. Denki looked at them and said, Last I did it I went brain dead. Shoto looked at Izuku and said, You're the new dad so why don't you do it? Izuku looked around to see Ida talking with the girls. What are you all talking about? Shoto said the 4 words every dad dreads. Who's playing Santa? Izuku's face paled as they stuffed him inside of a fat suit. Izuku couldn't breathe properly when they put a white beard on his face. They put in a white wig and Momo put some blush on his cheeks. You can walk, right? Izuku walked around the room ho-hoing. 𝐻/𝐿 finished setting up the rope and Hisoki stepped by her. Are you sure you want to trap Santa? 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and nodded. Yeah, besides it gives me something to do. Hisoki sighed and looked at Himiko who was getting her fire animals to set up some ropes. Katsu was watching everyone's work as he sat down on top of a table. 𝐻/𝐿 looked around in the adults' room to see no Izuku. Where did my daddy go? Hisoki looked and noted. No dads are there. Only moms and Ida. 𝐻/𝐿's eyes sparkled and she ran out. Katsu sighed and Hisoki walked after her. Mr. Ida. Mr. Ida. Ida looked down to see 𝐻/𝐿's bright smile. A pink-haired girl smiled as Ida picked 𝐻/𝐿 up. Hello, 𝐻/𝐿, how are you? 𝐻/𝐿 smiled and said, I'm good. Pinky tapped 𝐻/𝐿's shoulder and smiled. Hi. I'm May but call me Auntie May. You're so cute. You look like you could test out some of my gadgets. 𝐻/𝐿 looked Auntie May in the eye and said, You're mumbling. May's smile brightens and she kissed 𝐻/𝐿's forehead. Don't mind be hun. Now, do you want something to eat? 𝐻/N smiled and nodded. Can I have a cupcake? May nodded and Ida set down the girl. May came back and her eyes widened at how small she was. Hey hun, here's your cupcake. How old are you? 𝐻/N tilted her head and put up 5 fingers. May's eyes widened but the Hisoki dragged 𝐻/N back to the kids' room. We are also ready to trap Santa. 𝐻/N nodded but then Katsuo dragged 𝐻/N to the throne. Sit down. 𝐻/N did what she was told and Katsuo watched as Santa came out. Ho! I'm here. Katsuo stomped on a cord, pulled a piece of wood. The wood knocked over a marvel and the marvel set off a mousetrap. The mousetrap dropped the paint that dumped on top of Santa, who tripped into a mousetrap. Akio and Akane ran around him with rope and tied it. 𝐻/N smiled and Hisoki grabbed Santa's hair and pulled it off. The wig came flying off and 𝐻/N's eyes went wide. Kat looked shocked and he looked at Bakugo, who was recording the whole thing. Kick his butt. Akari and Rai shocked him and Akane melted the beard. Stop this moment. They turned to Momo and 𝐻/N stayed where she was. Imiko grabbed 𝐻/N's hand and dragged her behind Shoto. We did nothing. Shoto nodded and picked the girls up. Izuku looked at Katsuki for help but got the middle finger instead. 𝐻/N, if you help we can get them presents. 𝐻/N looked at Katsuo and said, release him. Katsuo sighed and snapped his fingers. Izuku was untied and he grabbed the bathroom handle. He changed and grabbed 𝐻/N. They went to deliver presents to the LOV. 𝐻/N ran around Izuku with a huge smile. Daddy, daddy. They were so happy. It was 27th of December and she was going on about the LOV's faces. Izuku nodded and then said, they were happy. How about we play a game? 𝐻/N tilted her head and said, game. Izuku nodded. He was honestly getting tired. All she ever talks about is the LOVs. The game doesn't have a name, but here are the rules. One of us is going to hide anywhere in this house. Not in the backyard or the front yard, but anywhere in this house. If you take a step on grass, you lose. The person looking for you is a hero. You're a villain and hiding from the hero. If the hero catches you before the timer goes off, you have to do one thing they say. If I don't find you before the timer goes off, then I will have to do a punishment of your choice. We are not allowed to use our quirks. It would be cheating. 𝐻/N smiled and shoved Izuku into a nearby closet. I'm going to go hide, Daddy. Before Izuku could even blink, she slammed the door on him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Meanwhile, 𝐻/N zoomed through the halls and found the place she was looking for. An open window. 𝐻/N said, don't step outside on the grass. It was still the house and she can crawl inside of a vent maybe. She climbed out and swung her tiny body up. She had to use her quirk to get on top of the roof, but who cares? It's not like Izuku would find out. 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. Ready or not, villain, I am here. Izuku ran through the halls checking all of the small places. He furrowed his eyebrows when he didn't find her. Izuku went down to the basement and nothing. Nothing moves, nothing makes sounds, just nothing. Izuku went upstairs and looked around. Did she break the rules? Maybe found a loophole in them. He checked his timer, only 5 minutes left. He didn't want to check outside, then he would lose. He went to the kitchen and searched the cabinets. Izuku went to the attic and found a window open. 2 minutes left. Izuku opened the window and looked up. He grabbed the roof's edge and pulled himself up. He ran around the roof, no sign of her. The timer beeped. 1 minute left. 𝐻/N held her breath as she hid in a large vent. It was pretty easy to get inside considering her size. It leads to the right so she didn't fall. Izuku sighed as the timer went off. 𝐻/N. The timer's up. I lost. 𝐻/N got out of the vent and Izuku's eyes widened. He never thought to check the vents. She then tripped, landing on her face. Izuku picked her up to see blood coming from her mouth. My baby. 𝐻/N held her tooth and started to cry. Izuku started to panic and ran inside. He went to the kitchen and tried to put the tooth back. My baby only has one front tooth. Izuku was panicking and called a number he thought was Shoto's. Hello. 𝐮𝐮𝐦𝐻𝐵 Midoryia. Izuku froze. He called his ex, 𝗧𝗬𝗟𝗃, wrong number. 𝗀𝗃 listened and asked, Is that crying? Izuku isked and said, I didn't mean to dial your number. 𝗀𝗃 before she could answer or say anything he hung up. He dialed Shoto. Izuku. Izuku started to panic again. My baby. She has BLD and I don't know what to do. She's crying and. Shoto sighed and said, I'm on my way. Izuku held a tissue to her mouth, seeing BLD ruin the white color. His face is getting paler with each passing minute. Shoto knocked on the door with Hisoki by his side. Izuku opened the door with such great force it startled Hisoki. She's bleeding. I ruined my baby. Shoto sighed and went to the kitchen. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 was crying softly while holding a now bloodied tissue. That's normal, Izuku. Shoto walked up to 𝐻𝗏𝗏 and placed his hand on her cheeks, cooling it down. Every child loses their teeth but new ones come. I thought you were smarter than this, Izuku. Izuku sighed in relief and 𝐻𝗏𝗏 held onto Shoto's cold hand. Hisoki grabbed a Ziploc baggie and gave it to 𝐻𝗏𝗏. Put the tooth in it and put the bag under your pillow. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 put the tooth in it and said, Why would I put it under my pillow? Hisoki smiled and said, So you can get money for it. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 nodded slightly and Shoto let go of her. He set her down by Hisoki and looked at him. Go show her what to do with the tooth. I have to talk with Izuku. Hisoki nodded and grabbed 𝐻𝗏𝗏's hand, dragging her upstairs. Hisoki went inside of her room and lifted up the pillow. Put the tooth under it. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 placed the bag under and Hisoki dropped the pillow. How did you lose your tooth? 𝐻𝗏𝗏 explained and he laughed slightly. Your dad worries too much. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 smiled and said, It feels weird without the tooth, I mean. Hisoki nodded and pulled his gum. It showed 2 missing tooths at the back. He stopped and said, I know. It probably will be difficult to talk all the way without your front tooth. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 smiled even though it looked weird. Hisoki didn't think so, he thought it was cute. Thank you. Can we not tell anyone of how I overreacted? Hisoki's eyes widened and he chuckled. He hugged her without warning and said, Sure. 𝐻𝗏𝗏 hugged him back. Shoto looked at Izuku and said, Did you even read the parenting books? Izuku shook his head, he was so busy he couldn't. Shoto sighed but then went upstairs. We are going to spy on them. Izuku's eyes widened as they looked through the creak of the door. Shoto smiled as Hisoki hugged 𝐻𝗏𝗏. Izuku, he felt like he needed to pick her up and take her where no boys could take her away. She was only a little girl. I shipped them. Izuku looked down at Shoto and said, Katsuki said something about Katsuo liking 𝐻𝗏𝗏 too. Shoto narrowed his eyes. No. She will become a part of my family because she is amazing. Izuku's sweat dropped. He knows Shoto was so fond of you was because you insulted his dad.